What is going on? Welcome back. This is SCP CRNP, aka Lack of Lepers, and welcome to the third, certainly not the last, of these Weekend Collapsibles. These are the SCP articles from this week, all tied up into a nice pretty bow, a nice package for you to consume in the course of a few hours, probably 2 to 3 hours, typically our running time. And so we got a lot of work to get to tonight, so let's go ahead and get into it. Before we get started, I want to thank you for joining. If you wrote any of these articles or read any of these articles, please feel free to jump on in and share your thoughts. We may have somebody, a special guest, jump in as well at some point in the stream. So I hope you're doing very, very good. We do have a lot of work to do, so let's get into that. A couple housekeeping things. Next week, we actually won't have this on Friday. I'll be out of town traveling to a funeral, unfortunately. So I'll figure that out during the week. You'll hear more about it next week before I go, which is the latter half of the week. But my guess is that we'll probably push this stream to Sunday night. I think that's probably what we'll do next week, this coming week. All right, and then before we get a rolling here, let me make sure that my buddy Brian is here. Brian, do a little mic check for us, if you don't mind.
Hello, testing the gigawatts. Testing the gigawigawatts.
Great.
Test.
Yeah, we can hear you coming in good. Can hear you just fine. Okay, so let us talk a little bit about what happens. So these SCPs are going to start on the 29th of the previous month, April. We go from Friday to Thursday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 days worth of articles. And this week we had 28 articles make it and last to the SCP Wiki. So, you know, about 3 a day on average, and we're getting to be anywhere from the 20 to 30 range, I think on a given week. So that's probably where we're going to live. So we got a lot to get through. So let me share the screen here, and we'll get started. Here you are. Okay, so we are starting again on 429. So let's jump in. So the first one is SCP 6516. Now, Brian, will you, just in the interest of conserving my voice through this 3-hour podcast, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what this article is about.
A wooded area that changes its shape and who shows visitors their dead loved ones. -A is a bell tower that when rung, ceases all the anomalous activity. This SCP seems to reflect the visitor's memories, and offers the protagonists some wish fulfillment. The apparitions the protagonists see act a little differently than what is previously documented.
Yeah, so this is sitting at about plus 38. It's written by DXVI. I'm not sure if you are supposed to pronounce that or what. Brian, could you tell me how to, maybe you can pronounce that for us. Maybe there's some sort of way to say it.
DXV.
Say it again?
DXV.
Oh, that's pretty beautiful. Beautiful name. Okay, so this, I really enjoyed this article. This is a straightforward and tidy anomaly here with a nice foundation for a narrative, something that really beckons characters and a story and exploration logs, and that's exactly what we get. So as Brian said, there's this wooded area. It shows you dead loved ones. There's a way to sort of get to the end. It's sort of like a video game level where you get to the end of this journey in this park, in this wood, and you basically, it's almost like when Mario jumps and hits the flag, and then you end the level. That's basically what this is. So it really, once again, beckons this story arc with a conclusive narrative, and so that's really where the author takes it. Now, these exploration logs down here, as you see collapsed, are interesting in that they have a little bit of a spin to them. The main character in this article basically requests to do this particular exploration log. And once again, this is SCP 6516. Let me just type that, 6516, so that we all know what we're talking about. 6516, there we go. So, Yeah, welcome in. So yeah, all these exploration logs feature pretty much two protagonists. One is female, one is male. They're in a relationship together. And it's a little interesting because we're told that this was really done at the request of the explorer agents. And also that the two agents are knowingly, romantically involved. So that was just a unusual inclusion that you don't always see every day. So, this is kind of an interesting bit as well. They're basically given a recording device and they're given basically some privacy. That is to say, the Foundation doesn't look at their recording until after they're done. So that's also another little sort of odd flavor that just tells you that there are things going on in this article that are a little past the baseline expectation and just a little different already from the get-go. I do appreciate how this is arranged. You have all of the exploration logs in their own div. This is a quote box, and they're all collapsed in this way. So that's a little unique as well. I don't think that really works well with the footnotes down there, too. There's a little too much continuity between the exploration logs and the footnotes that probably should be set off. But otherwise, I think it's, once again, something you don't see every day. So there's a lot of things about this article that instantly sort of capture your attention and kind of give you the impression that the author is doing things that are not normal, that may be a little more thoughtful than what is typically presented, what people's first inclination might be. And so let's get into these exploration logs, just summarize them very briefly. The first one starts with the two protagonists entering the car for a road trip, not really at the anomaly like you might imagine. And so what might be an obvious question, why are we starting this when they get into the car and not, when the rubber meets the road, so to speak, if you'll excuse the analogy, when they get to the actual anomaly? But it turns out to be answered later on in the article as to why this is. And it actually turns out to be very pivotal by the end. So it really does wrap around and form a nice suture with what otherwise would be sort of an odd, jarring, very ungrounded, very unlevel portion of this structure. But it really does come back and treat it well. So in this article, in this exploration log, we get a peek into this long road trip sort of banter between these two individuals. The log establishes the characters and their relationship. We get that they haven't really been here or together in a while, and that work has somewhat gotten in the way of their relationship. And that's really about it in the way of characterization. Now, there's a few things in here that got this off to a rocky start. Until the very end of the article, once again, that really being where everything sort of is compiled into a very, very pointed delivery of a conclusion. Until that very end, these characters to me initially, particularly in the first exploration log, seem a little bit stale. They connect over some music. You can see them here singing softly to one another. But the dialogue between them really isn't that interesting fresh out of the gate, and nor does it establish a believable, deep relationship between the two of them, which is something that we might like to see, and that I think probably would have better propelled this article as it was taking off of the runway. So we have what I would describe as Hollywood tier lines in this that try to almost force a chemistry between the two. So for example, this right here, this line says, Agent Ash is singing, so once again, they're singing together, they giggle, they haven't heard this in ages. This is the kind of stuff that you might see just a, Hollywood tier production basically show when it comes to two people who they need to establish a relationship between very quickly. Then you have sort of this like jibing kind of banter between the two of them that tries to establish this as well. So for example, you have lines like this. Agent Ash, don't complain, I always got us there on time. Agent Browning, mostly in one piece. Agent Ash begins to laugh, but stops herself suddenly and clears her throat. Well, these sort of like typical sort of haha, almost like, they're awkward with one another sort of moments in the dialogue. So what doesn't help this just starting off with is that it's peppered with references to their past trips together. And while sure, this lets us know that they've been through a lot together and maybe that there were better times in their past, all of it together seems a bit of a character crush. So for example, we have numerous references to old times. Reminds me of the New Forest. remember is one line. And then not after Andalusia, which is another one that obviously these things are sort of just dangled out there. Marvel movie. Oh, hey, we got Harmony. What's going on? Harmony is here. Thank you for joining. And Harmony is gonna tell us a little bit about a few of these SCP articles. So feel free to jump on in if you got something to say while we're talking. Obviously the stage is open and welcome to you. Just feel free to hop on in. Yeah, Marvel. Yeah, exactly. So there's kind of this Marvel thing going on. It says you can add me to the broadcast. Add to stream. There you are.
Whoa!
Hey, it's Harmony. How's it going?
It is going quite well. How do you do?
I do well. It sounds like you've recovered from your procedure quite nicely.
Yeah, I can move my lip all the way. Oh, nice.
That's novel. That's nice. What a luxury. All right. Well, good. Yeah. So thanks for joining, Harmony. I asked Harmony if she would be interested in helping out with these articles this week, and she said yes. So thank you very much. Harmony's going to take a whole day worth of articles. I think a busy day too, right? Like 5 or 6 articles.
Oh, is it busy? Five? They weren't particularly long.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think it was something like that number, but obviously these things can be a lot shorter or longer depending upon how nice they are. So we'll get to that.
I got some quick hand notes I wrote about all the different ones that I'm going to look at.
Exactly. That's the way we'll do it. So feel free to chime in. I'm sure, as always, you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to these things. So we're just getting to our first. I'll spend a little more time on ones that I enjoy, obviously, perhaps, maybe. And then the ones that are not as good, obviously, we'll get a little quicker through those ones as well. I thought this was an interesting moment in this article through the exploration log. They basically throw some lizard at They throw some shade at the lizard at SCP-682. Some people think the Foundation, all the anomalies we work with have some point or message to them. And Agent Ash asks, "What's the point of the lizard?" So if you listen to Dr. Gear's commentary on it, the point of the lizard is actually pretty deep. Go check out the Sean Saxum interview with him. Looks can be deceiving, especially if they're from Series 1. But,
yeah, so it's deceiving. It's exactly what it's doing. People refusing to see the fun of them, that it's not important.
Yeah, well, in this Sean Saxum interview, Gears was talking about how he tried to envision this bubble pushing into our reality. And this thing behind it that's just so, Lovecraftian and otherworldly and eldritch that, you can't really understand it. All you can really decipher is that curvature of the bubble that's sort of, convexing its way into our reality. And so he kind of gives it a little more depth than I thought it could ever have in that interview. It's just a really interesting moment he does there.
It's almost like he's skipped this or something.
Yeah, it's almost like he was a little ahead of most everybody, for quite a long time there.
Even now,
yeah. And happy to have him back. All right. So yeah, these. Let's just get to the overall. Oh, say again.
Jesus Christ, that is a long article.
Yeah, this is a long one. So
dialogue.
Most of it is dialogue, so that's nice. Obviously dialogue is a little more spaced out than just straight up blocks of prose. But yeah, this was a relatively long one. I think it really does justify its length pretty well. At no point in the read do you get super duper, just like, so ready for it to end. I think it really is very kind to the reader in that regard. It does have some issues like apparition is misspelled in here. That shows up quite a lot. There's some missed question marks. With periods instead of them, small things like no spaces after the ellipses, which is kind of unique to the SCP Wiki. I kind of learned that there. But yeah, overall, it's a story via an anomaly. And it's about the loss of a loved one who we have to say goodbye to and let go of. But it's an interesting compositional play where the agents familiar with the anomaly can be excited about visiting it, which is something that we don't typically see. Once again, these people are volunteering to go on this exploration log, something obviously a little unusual. And they're doing this, of course, so that they can see their lost loved ones one more time. And even the main character is given this emotional thorn in her side that the anomaly she can hope will remove and provide some closure. So I thought that was a nice bit of characterization. And this whole setup really mixes kind of an eerie, otherworldly, post-death sort of discomforting thing with, you know, the reuniting embrace of a loved one. So it's just an interesting mix of things. There's an old writer's trick near the very end of this in the last exploration log that's really, it constitutes really a twist. I think it's really played to very, very good effect here. Despite being a little trite, I didn't see it coming. It was well done enough to be okay with, and it actually gave me the chills. This is the first time I've read an article in a long time that actually gave me some sort of somatic response. And so, you know, with Harmony, maybe it was SCP-3001, keeping her up at night, you know, and this one gave me chills. It literally, I mean, just was a very odd thing to happen, but I really appreciated this article. So, definitely recommend a read. It is long, but it is good. And I think the rating of 38 at this point at a weekend is pretty fair. I think it's probably should be probably a little higher than that, but it's got some love. The discussion really heaps on the praise. So looks like it's just a matter of eyes getting on it, but it's well up to meet the moment and meet the task. Hey, Harmony, would you like to just exchange articles? You can go ahead and do yours, maybe one by one. That way, if you need to get out of here, because we usually take about 2.5, 3 hours here. So
no, I got any time. I'm seeing some friends tonight, but not until like night. They're all night out, and then past my bedtime.
Oh, this will work out well. We'll get you there. We'll tell you what. Why don't you pick one, and we'll jump ahead and check that one out. Just let me know which one you're looking at.
Let's do the gimmick one.
Okay, which one is that?
Guess.
Oh, Sacred Relic?
Bingo.
Okay. Sacred Relic 5674. Also known as SCP 5674. All right, let me type this in here.
The only note that I wrote down was just the word gimmick.
Yeah. All right, so boom, 5674. So we got Sacred Relic. The CSS tells us that it's from the Ecumenical Archives, this being obviously highly religious in its tone. And yeah, so it's an interesting looking article. Yes, there is definitely a gimmick going on here. What is the gimmick, and what did you think of it?
I wasn't going to read it out loud, and then I wanted to get it. It's a really funky in the way that it's written in terms of. It's weird. Let me just have it out.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can see for yourself. You say Reddit class safe. Ceremony.
Yeah, who knows? My gosh, let's use our AI. Brian, my old friend, tell us how to pronounce this.
Ceremonia.
There you go.
Ceremonia. Okay.
Beautiful.
I don't mind that. All right. But maybe will any good conduits of SR-624 found in the possession of confiscated if the offender is repentant for their acts necessary. The conduits are constituted of simple or distinct matter, and any reliquary within a locked box. Ecumenical personnel are allowed to forge and use conduits. Nope. They are permitted to use conduits for the position of the cult converter. So you can see it starts as it needs to go on.
Yeah, it's really got this sort of elevated sort of tone to it, doesn't it?
It does. It reminds me of when we had the group of interest there was ORIA rebranding of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard that was because of realization.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the OR actually the IRG. Thank you, Bijan. Very cool.
It kind of reminds me too of just from the other side of things on the RPC. This kind of is the old Tortratus kind of vibe, from Knights of Templar kind of capitalizations everywhere, things like this.
I'll be honest, when I was reading this, there's a Sabaton, there's all kinds of war and Swedish heavy metal, and a lot of the lyrics are kind of stuff like the read the Swedish accent. I think it could be a weird heavy metal history band.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a good example. So it's almost like a psalm the way it reads. It reads like a prayer. So this is definitely sort of a gimmick approach. Basically, just to summarize it, it is a sort of a complex Christian orthodoxy version of a black box, but with a peephole, and it has this interesting effect if activated correctly, through like prayer, that will show the viewer, what reality would be like if they didn't have a certain person living.
Wait, so I just made a connection in my brain because I was having a hard time understanding what this was actually about Reddit because it's written.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what's the thing that you see sometimes where it's like the person so and see what the life would be like if they were born.
Yeah, it's exact. Yeah.
There's a name, right? Or what's it called?
What it would be like if you were never. I'm just gonna try this. I don't know. But yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Sounds like there's some sort of device or trope. Maybe?
Yeah, this is definitely a well-known trope.
Better if not born. There you go. Better if not born is kind of what the hit I get.
Is that on TV tropes or something?
Yeah. So that may be the closest thing we can find here, but that's exactly right. So yes. And it's so funny because most things written, still to this day probably could fit somewhere in a lot of these tropes. Whether it's TV tropes or the SCP sort of, sub playground of those tropes.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I'm glad to talk to you about this. I had a real difficulty tales.
Oh, me too.
It was very confusing.
No, me too. So smarter people than me talked about it in the comments and gave some more insight. I felt like. Yeah. No, I always. There's a way around that. You might not know.
I think it's logging out.
Yeah, I don't know if they know. I don't know if they know that we know that we can do that. But so the text is very, very hard to parse and decipher, with the feeling that there's some significant things going on. With even these masked references to other SCPs, but not with enough landing strip, I guess, to make touchdown for me. Like I was with you. I didn't really understand a lot of what was going on.
There's no build up. It's coming in hot, and there's no apologies for it.
Mm-hmm. And some people love it. So I mean, if you happen to get it, this does reuse some real sort of IRL characters, in things like mythos and lore and things like that. But the ultimate, I think, thrust of the article is a message that tries to ask the reader to think twice about that, better if not born plot with respect to their enemies, which is a little.
I see. It's got a reference to Hungry. 10 out of 10 best article.
There you go. Yeah, definitely a history buff sort of article. So if you can get past the way that it's termed, the style of the tone here, it may be a rewarding article. Like I said, it kind of went over my head, but once I kind of got a little bit more of the idea of what was going on, it made enough sense to me where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it.
Is the 2 Corinthians thing a Trump joke?
Is it a what now?
2 Corinthians. I remember when he was in 2016, he was talking about Bible verse. He said 2 Corinthians. I don't know. And I'm seeing that now.
Let's check it. Yeah. I guess I used to read the Bible back in the day, so it's 2 Corinthians.
I know it's 2 Corinthians. Trump said 2 Corinthians.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's pretty good. Yeah. 2 of them. 2 is better than 1. 2 Corinthians.
Both of those guys.
That's pretty funny. That is something he would say. All right. Well, good deal. All right. Thank you. So, hey, let's just keep going. Let's just go with yours, and then I'll circle back, as they say. Where would you like to go next?
Ooh, let me look at my notes here.
It's like Jeopardy.
1631, I thought was a thought it used some element to it.
Oh, do tell.
Yeah, just the way that it was it kind of had that you get when you're reading a backroom kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what I thought. Yeah, go ahead.
There's the line infinite lattice of recursive bending lines. It's like an impossible kind of deal. I like the phrase skirting board dimension. That sounds really cool. And then the conversation with Lamont Gainsborough. I wonder if that's just coincidence. But Lamont had an interesting conversation about it in here.
Yeah. Oh, he was the.
It's too soon.
Yeah,
that's
he's
my making
the.
it too short.
Yeah, Gainsborough was the owner of the flats. Lamont was the officer. I did think of Lament when I read that, by the way. But yeah, no, you're 100% correct. So let's take just the first few lines of the description here. So the SCP is an extra-dimensional spatial anomaly. The precise interior dimensions of the anomaly remain unknown, and direct exploration has proven difficult. It physically resembles, as you say, an infinite lattice of recursive bending lines, almost like a fractal image. So it goes on to describe the space, which is just non-Euclidean, basically. And it has very, very strong limb-fic tones all throughout this, I think. So that really is its bread and butter. You know, it's a very minimalist article, doesn't use a whole lot. These things that you think will be sort of gateways to bigger narrative inclusions, like this skirting board world, kind of just are standalone, and it really just makes a lot with just the most basic of the ingredients here.
It makes me want more. That's good.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. Skirting board world even calls to mind things like no clipping. You know, the most fundamental things about. Yeah.
I think of that.
Yeah, that's kind of what we see. So it gets a little new sphere techno-babbly. Basically, what's going on here is, like I said, extra-dimensional space. It's fractalized. It's also in flux, so it'll just dramatically shift and mutate topologically. And then there are some entities in there that they noted that they designate as -1. So, you know, it casts this obscure website that doesn't come back around, which I was happy to see, because I think the whole outsourcing the discovery and the initial investigation to a website is sort of a lazy move, in my opinion. It just happens quite a lot. I think people use that just a little too liberally. So I was happy to see that this doesn't come back around. Say again.
You know what I bet it was. But it's one article that was all those people. I think they should kill yourself or something. That it's like your people on forum. Anyways, ever since you wrote that website article.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Gosh, I think I remember what you're talking about, but I don't.
It's look at the picture of the shoe water.
Okay.
Like
For some reason,
I'm
only remembering that that TV is fun thing, that show is fun, something like that, with stepping out of the shower. But yeah.
Yeah, that was around the same time. It was good. So good at this.
So fucking good. I mean, you know, I don't know if you've ever done like a author study where you go back and you look at all their articles in the succession, but even the early ones have something going for them that is not typical. And I'll give you an example of this. Is that one of the very, very first articles that Pepper's Ghost wrote was this ring. I think it was like a Mickey Mouse ring, even, where you put it on, and it was a watch. That's right. And if you modify the dial of the watch, it will extend the bones of your digits in length to where at some point they will rip out of your skin and keep going and keep growing. And it's sort of like this causal thing where you dial back and they retract, and you can do this to all different kinds of bones depending upon what you put this watch on. And that article was actually referenced in Kalinen's 001. So there's a portion in Kalinen's 001 where it goes back and it modifies a bunch of old anomalies from old articles, and it picked Pepper's Ghosts. So I mean, I think that's high praise, just that was selected, and I think that was their first.
Was it? Well, they started to go on that.
I'm not 100% sure, but it was one of their early ones, and I felt like, you know, when Kalinin basically takes it up and makes it a part of the 001 that they did, I think that's, you know, you probably got something going on.
Hell yeah. He put a bunch of random ones. He put like my infamous and a weird one read about Franklin County, Tennessee. He mentioned in our world.
Yeah, I'd love to know the thought process behind that. You know, was it just sort of like obscure articles that he wanted to give more love to, or
I have no idea. He didn't consult me beforehand.
Not the most talkative guy, I guess.
No, he just kind of does it. Or did it. Sad.
Yeah, I wonder what he's doing. All right, so back to this article. So there's a discovery log, this video log transcript, which is, I think, where the article really got fantastic. You know, a lot of the beginning was just sort of set decoration. It was just sort of getting ready. And then in the transcript, as you say, there's a nice interaction between the characters here. And it's just once again, this very limbic sort of vibe. The build-up doesn't disappoint. I think that basically what happens in this exploration log is you get a lot of sensory involvement. So you get sort of like smells, you get sounds.
The ending is so good.
Yeah, the ending is crazy. And it's just
very much in the Vila Rasa.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's, you know, it's like, oh, that's an obvious consequence of this sort of no clipping thing. You know, that you know, we've seen even like in video games, like we see this sort of happens to characters, you know, who get no clip, you know, and the game doesn't know what to do with them, you know. So that's kind of where this, I don't want to ruin the ending or anything, but the pacing of this is edge of your seat. It's an excellent use of kind of a show don't tell at the very end there, and just kind of gives the just perfect amount of knowledge redaction for the reader at the very, very end. You don't get to see it.
Like at the end of the word.
Yeah. So this is, it's just gross, but it's not too gross. Nothing in this is overbaked. You know, it could be very easy to overdo so much of this article, but it never happens.
I want to know more. This one's actually, I think this one's another one that I was going to say. I'm going to share my favorite of the five that I read. Talking about it has made me.
Yeah, this
maybe is. Change my mind. Who knows?
Hey, we'll take that into consideration when we pick one for the article of the week. I think we got some pretty stiff competition this week. We had a lot of international articles drop late in the week in the last few days, and some of those were pretty damn good. All right, so that was that. Definitely a recommendation from me, and it sounds like a recommendation from Harmony as well.
Yes.
And it's not too long, so even if you end up not liking it, it's not too much of a commitment. That's what you love about that.
I'm revving the soul of what?
There you go. All right, let's move right along. Harmony, you're up. Jeopardy style.
Okay. Let's read here. Look at my notes. I said 6804. Stupid.
Okay.
506 told a story.
Let me type it in here.
504.
Let's see. You said 6804.
Yeah, I thought it was dumb.
We will save that shit and then pop it up here for everyone to see. All right, 6804. Oh, yeah. I recall this one. Speaking of gimmick, can we say it again? Can we?
Don't like.
Yeah.
It sucks.
So
sucks.
What's going on in this article? Tell us a little bit about it.
It's cyan. I feel, or I don't really know what it's trying to do. I don't really get it. It feels like I'm missing something. It's info hazard. It's making the text appear differently for some reason. And also my colorblind reading this. So
yeah, no, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Wow.
My eyes hurt to look at this.
Yeah, so that's right. And so, you know, you say you don't get what's going on here, but it may be just a factor of this not having a lot of substance to it. There's not a lot to get. There's really not.
Yeah, I'm missing something.
Well, let's talk about it because I think I can fill you in, but it doesn't end up it being any more impressive. So this is a digital infohazardous phenomenon affecting the Foundation database that consumes non-teal colored text, basically. Okay. So it's really this whole. That's why you see this teal text gimmick popping up. And so you have to write this anomaly in universe, this article, in a way that prevents a containment breach or these anomalous effects happen. And the anomalous effect that's happening here is that any text that isn't this shade of teal gets, quote unquote, devoured by this anomaly. So, I mean, how many times have we seen this sort of thing done? Where it's like you have
about 10 million times.
There's this informational, idiosyncratic anomaly where if you don't do these exact things in the document, and that's how you justify it in universe.
This was under 5 miles an hour.
Exactly. Yeah. So what is that movie? Speed? Is that the movie?
Yes.
Speed? So it's a speed formula. It's the speed.
No. Now it's the cruise control formula.
Yeah, exactly. So we really are on cruise control. It's amazing to me that by now articles like this haven't, been treated with the, series 1 done to death sort of treatment. It is only a PlayStation. Yeah, it is. But on that note, it is safe. It's a couple days into it. So I think it'll probably last. But
definitely.
Yeah,
but a couple years.
There's some real problems with this. So if we go down to the testing log, this cyan text just clashes so much with the Sigma 9 theme that isn't really changed.
This didn't my eyes to read.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, first of all, just by itself, I mean, the best it can possibly be, just on the white background, is still a little jarring. But when you get to these testing logs, you have, of course, this top crimson banner up here, and you have this cyan text, this teal text on that, Sigma 9 crimson header color, which is just it's a nauseating color. It's like vomit, for your eyes, like instantly. So that wasn't good. And then this table, by the way, doesn't really tell us anything new. It doesn't tell us anything that the description didn't tell us. So it does commit this sort of structural sin. We don't learn anything new.
Also, I'll say the description. My least favorite thing SCP, which is start everything compared to the item.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I didn't notice that, but you're absolutely correct.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's a great point. See, this is why I love talking about things like this, is because there's little details that I may have missed, but yeah, you have to machine this well. In moments like that, the machinery sticks out poorly. It's like
it shows a lack of polish.
Yeah, exactly, lack of polish. Somebody didn't do a good job with the polish or with the welding together of the article. So let's get to the real gimmick of this. So at the very last addendum, there's this containment text, which sort of in the article tells you that this is the playground of the anomaly, that they allow it to do what it does. So what happens is you open this up and you see this like mangled faux documentation, and it's actually code that takes the text, and if you watch carefully, it actually removes letters gradually. Every 3 seconds or something, certain letters will be just eaten, just like the anomaly is doing its thing. So that's the gimmick. That's the article. So
I'll be honest. I watched this to admitting like something other than just
yeah. Well, once again, it's not very appealing to the eye when you first open it up. Obviously, it's completely percolated. It's like Swiss cheese, of a text block, and so it's already off to a bad start there. But I mean, so you might think this is a GIF, or a GIF, excuse me, but like an animated image, but it's actually code. So if you highlight it, that's the way you can tell it's actually code. It's actually text. So there is a little impressive bit of code here, and it's cool to see, but it just, it doesn't seem like it carries the article at all.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing here. It's like the start of something, but it would be cool if the code turned into legible text. And it's just
yeah. In fact, let's get Brian to read this. See what he's got to say about it.
Special Containment Procedures, OL former NFNHS document SEOlosely rated to SC680 as overused TF.
Okay, that's enough, Brian. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, I mean, basically, this article comes down to, I mean, and this is what I mean by poor polish and poor machinery, is that it's very, very clear that this article was retro-created in order to be around this. This is the tell of the whole structure. It's the chip in the armor. You know, it's the very clear moment that basically everything else was tailored to be about, so that this could be done, so that this could basically be, hey, look at this impressive code that I did, which is impressive, but it's nothing more than that. It's kind of flimsy.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
So you would not recommend this read?
No, I would say skip this, especially if you have seeing color, because you will add time.
I didn't even think about that. That's a really good point. Now you may, the only thing I would recommend in this is maybe just to go look at the code if you're a code junkie. This looks pretty impressive, but I mean, this is totally not for everybody. And once again, I certainly think that 15 is completely overrated for this article. Unfortunately, I think it sort of duped, hoodwinked the people who voted for it. No offense, but I certainly don't think that it has enough substance to actually merit, such a rating at least.
Not good.
All right, so another one down. Harmony, let's continue. You just tell me the next one you got on your notes there, and we'll head to that one.
6506. I like that one.
All right, let me change this. Wish I had a better way to do this. 6506, you say. Tell us a little bit about it.
It's an emotional article about Tharsis and achieving emotional sense. I thought was very interesting to tackle for SCP all the time. It's kind of like a doll. I won't say it's not a voodoo doll. It's kind of paper cloth here that makes it so that when you read, you achieve catharsis by quote unquote moving the worry. And also this doll is trying to get around here.
Oh, you're right. Oh, wow. Look, there it is. Charlie Brown. Hey. Yeah, so I had to look into this because it was really, first of all, the image is just adorable. It's instantly hooking, It kind of reminds me of an article from Series 5 where it's basically like this twine mouse thing. It just screams SCP to me, potential.
Absolutely. Thank you. Pause it.
And then even the little wooden arms make this a little bit creepy. Not like creepy enough to actually be so, but it just gives that. It's just perfect SCP
vibe.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect. It's perfect imagery. So just a nice picture selection and just a wonderful tonal setting by the use of this image on the part of the author.
Yeah, this was the one that I had the most. I really like it. It's got a really cool plan. Actually explores the premise pretty thoroughly, which is you don't see often because authors are exclusively lazy people.
Mm-hmm. This is a long one. I mean, most of it is talk. So
it's all about different emotions, closure, and catharsis that are all. It's kind of like a string of bangers here.
There you go. Well, that's good. See, yeah, I mean, it definitely has seemingly phases in the SCP where it'll have it's almost like a stock. It peaks, it goes up, and then maybe plateaus and goes down a bit.
Yeah, it's really this one explores which I think unfortunately not enough the way it's here really well. I don't want to spoil it until how the scenario play out. I strongly recommend reading that early. It's really interesting. Just the premise alone of having dreamer to explore this thing that causes dreams, and then extrapolating from there. Like I was like, ooh, all right, let's check this out.
Yeah, if you're into dreams, or you lucid dream, this obviously is going to be an article that'll speak to you.
Yeah, and the first we wrote the I don't think that owner part of you little F.
Wow.
Sure.
What a missed opportunity, huh?
No, honestly, I like it that way.
Okay, cool.
I was like in favor of that's why the class group of interest. So this having every other thing.
Well, let me tell you, I did a little research on this. So this is actually what's called a worry doll, and this is a token of a sort of like post-Mayan, like Spanish-speaking indigenous people cultural export. And it's actually mentioned the individual in here has a name. I can't remember where exactly it is, but it really the SCP-6506. Yeah, here it is. I am this name right here, which we can maybe get Brian to help us out with.
Ixmacane, a moon yet a quitterpon.
Excumane, what a good name. Cool shit. So that's actually like, yeah, it's actually a lore character. So it's just this like folklorish character who appears all over, Guatemalan tradition, for example, who does exactly what the article says, basically appears in dreams and helps people sort of soothe away their, in real life anxieties.
That's cool. I'd like to tie it into real life. I had no idea.
Yeah, and so we can see
this.
this.
The article does it.
Yeah, and so it really it plays it straight, but like you say, I think it really gives it a lot of depth. You know,
a lot of meat.
Exactly. Yeah, it takes this little doll and brings it to life.
My favorite line from where like I think it's my mother. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, there it is.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and look, it's a cliffhanger too, right there at the end of that video.
You just go feed throat.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. It's good structure. Okay, so yeah, this is
Although I will say my one critique, they kind of do that thing. Basically, almost every line kind of more effective if you only did one.
Oh, so they do this sort of cliffhanger thing, you say?
Like three times in a row, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you gotta use it tactfully. You don't wanna cause any sort of insensitivity.
Because like there's three or four do that, and then the last don't. They have different ways of ending.
Cool. Well, it's nice to see.
The only critique that I like a lot.
Yeah, it's nice to see when the author has some situational awareness and will avoid using the same tactic like that. If only at least eventually. And then I thought this was a really, really cool inclusion. I'm just kind of a geek for these sorts of things, but you have this neuron imaging engine mentioned, and this actually is a link to another article that I think goes into this a little more, but it's a machine designed to detect sensory information during REM sleep and convert it into a video format. And so I just thought that was so cool. It's just... yeah, sort of like a very SCP thing, such a cool paratechnology that's just perfectly fit for, this SCP universe. And I think, really is used very well in this article's narrative.
I clicked the link, refreshing because it have that stupid shit on top of it.
You're talking about that ACS?
I am.
Oh, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that now, actually. Let's do that. Let me get to this. So this is... I think it's 503KO. Let's go there. 503KO. This is a Korean article that I think most people, a lot of people are familiar with. Oh, by the way, the link from that paratechnology goes to Captain Kirby's 4000 contest entry about dreaming, and that has a fantastic name. Yeah, sometimes I look at the sky so I can feel small. Beautiful name. That is such a... I think... Now, I paid a lot of attention to the 4000 contest. If you'll recall, I did all those little supplemental awards. I was paying very, very close attention to the 4K. And I think this was my favorite title of the whole contest. I think about this title all the time. In fact, just not to get a little too weird and surreal, but I was thinking about this title a few hours ago when I was just chilling outside looking at the clouds, and I had no idea that this was the link to this article. But this is a fantastic one. Captain Kirby, always a good read.
He's good at this thing.
Back to ACS. So this is a article that came out, and it's from the Korean branch, and this was written quite a while ago. Let's see if we can get any more information about it. Not really. Translated, obviously, and it's really a take on the ACS. Now, it's not really making fun of it. It's not like a bashing article, but at the same time, it unavoidably has... Yeah, exactly. It sort of plays in that ambiguity because it unavoidably says some things about the ACS. I mean, even if you didn't read anything and you just scrolled through it, you have this sort of non-starter here. You have people who are clearly trying to work with it. They kind of get it, but then they change it. and it's all over the place, and then they change this, they change that, and then by the end of it, this is what you get, where there's just way too much going on, which is its own commentary, obviously, and then by the end, you just get this, which is, I mean, even as a pantomime, like I said, not reading any of this, like just a pantomime is already, I think, clever enough for an upvote, in my opinion.
Yes, a little story there.
Yeah, and it is. So you read it through the footnotes. Basically, there's something going on here where there's something anomalous about the ACS system. So it takes this sort of in-universe justification that I think DJ Cactus wrote as as sort of like a memo from the desk of Gene Carlisle Actus or whatever it is, telling people about the ACS and sort of nesting it into this in-universe sort of explanation. And so it kind of runs with that. It sort of takes it from an in-universe perspective and basically puts the whole document in these footnotes that are attached to the ACS. So as you can see here, we have footnote 5 with the special containment procedures and other things too, like description is over here. But so just to give you an idea of what this is, it's an alternative classification system partially applied to Foundation records known commonly as ACS. Yada yada yada. So it basically self-replicates, which is also kind of unavoidably commentary. So the anomaly here is that the ACS self-replicates all over documents where it wasn't previously, and it's gotten to be such an overgrowth that it becomes a problem. So, I mean, that's kind of a statement,
I really like this. This is very smart.
It is, and
It's really has a really good understanding of how this format.
Yeah, and this block right here, this is really well done. It takes a bunch of work. I mean, look at this. You got overlapping sort of geometries here that are not typical of the.
They made this, right? They do this. They made this.
Yeah, they hacked it. I mean, look at this. They got the Facebook. They have the Facebook thumbs up right here. I mean, that was easy. I mean, so there's a lot of like just really fine detail in here that's not easy to do. I mean, somebody
such a normal high. That's so.
Yeah.
It's so clever.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the one hand, obviously somebody is thoroughly aware of the ACS and probably has some sort of love for it in their heart because, when you use it this much, when you use it this well, and you actually push it, beyond its normal boundaries and its limits, obviously you have some sort of bond with it,
This is my first time that I like.
Yeah, right. I think I can count on one hand ones that I've seen that actually look good to me. Let's see. This was last week. I think this one somehow looks good. It'll just happen very rarely. That wasn't it. It's a different one.
There's almost nothing to it.
Yeah. See, it's when it's really minimal. It's when you have all the colors together clashing. That's when it looks like.
Shit.
Yeah, it looks like this. I'll always reference this. Mike and Ike's, just like somebody spilled a box. Like this is what ACS looks like typically. But it can look really good if you make a strong effort to coordinate the aesthetics. Mike and Ike's. Yeah, that's ACS right there. All right. So anyway, that was 503KO. I didn't have that up from that. There you go. Let's see, 503KO. That was that. All right, Harmony. Take us to the next one you got on your list there.
All right, the last one on my list. I did not enjoy it. I think you get into SCP 554.
Okay.
So this one, I just to be totally disjointed. Like it's throwing a bunch of shit at you, and there's no. It's all go. And then the dialogue sounds like a Marvel movie. And instead of being done in the middle, it doesn't give you information. Then it kind of just ends.
Yeah. So let's back up and talk a little bit about what it is. So it's a psychological anomaly that anthropomorphizes the visible surfaces of the moon and the sun, and it really weaves in a sort of unease that results from being watched by these anthropomorphized faces. So I think that
reminded me of how the boss of the sun like think this reading the article, which may affect my ability to take it more.
You said it reminded you of a Kirby video game?
The recurring boss.
Oh,
the son of the pages.
Yeah. Sorry, your mic is a little.
It's potato quality. This is bad.
Yeah. So there was things about this. I agree with you. I think that this is not a worthwhile read.
Article.
Yeah. And I have my own issues with it. I mean, there are small things that are forgivable, but that are just sort of like, getting the wrong vibe from somebody when you first meet them, just first introduction kind of things, like putting your self-insert as the site director. I mean, just, it's pretty juvenile. Like I cannot imagine doing that. I would never ever do that. It's just me. It's just a me thing, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, so I think that there's some interesting parts about the anomaly itself is pretty interesting. I mean, you take the idea of the man on the moon, the face in the moon, and you give it this like otherworldly sort of eeriness, that it's looking at you, which is terrifying. If you imagine going outside and you have this overwhelming feeling of just being, it's like being in the room with that painting whose eyes always follow you, but it's in the fucking sky.
You're just being living in a state.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think it really starts off with a bang. It really starts off with some very impressive ingredients, but I think unfortunately what we're seeing here is something like a chef who doesn't know what to do with those ingredients. I mean, by the time you get even a little way down, I think that you've really ruined it. This is unfortunately something that's a little typical of authors who we can put into this one school of thought and school of composition. J. Dune, Plague, PJP, Rounderhouse, these sort of Neo-Law Foundation authors on the whole, where there's this lurching experience. It's almost this breakneck experience of some truly fantastic ideas, truly fantastic thoughts, anomalies starting off the right way, just brilliant anomalies.
They expect the chariot to follow through.
Yeah, exactly. And so it doesn't have legs, and so you get this sort of like back and forth tugging of just great moments, but they're juxtaposed immediately with these absolutely questionable dips in writing quality and just, in my opinion, bafflingly bad compositional decisions. So, for example, say again.
The second addendum is the worst part.
Let's take a look. So yeah, as we scroll down to it, we see these like span boxes that I wish I had code on my browser as a plugin that would just remove, because if that would happen, I think it would be a much better article. They're just so overdone. Yeah. Okay. Addendum 2. Yeah. So this is a table that just abandons. Yeah. Just totally acquiesces to this downward trajectory of compositional decisions, where it just loses all semblance of being.
So once again, heavy metal
Exactly. Yeah, but it's funny. You can almost treat this as like a mathematical matrix and like get one of those songs out of it. So you can read it across, kill, all is none, and you can read it down, kills, can't, no screaming, and then kills, maybe diagonally, kills C, can't freeze, and you can just make stanzas out of this shit. This is an actual. It's like a great mathematical matrix for the most cringiest metal lyrics ever.
Oh my god!
There's the song title right there: Sun Moon, Sun Moon. So yeah, I mean, that's just. I'm telling you, dude. Like that's just. I hate to say it. I hate to like be reductionist and just put everybody under this abstract rubric, but yeah, like once again, these Neo-Law Foundation authors, that's what they do. They just they jerk. It's like if they were driving the car, they would be just like hopping, trying to change gears, and they're just tearing up the gearbox. Like they can't do it. They have this idea that they like establish themselves in some sort of like anomaly, and then it's just playtime, and it's just a very distracting, very disorienting, and ultimately a very unsatisfying read.
Yeah, this dialogue. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, but it really does take notes from Marvel stuff. I don't know about this one particularly, but it's got some pretty trite motions of characterization in here, and I think actually.
How do you pronounce Doctor?
Well, let's make our AI work for its job. You want to hear the pronunciation of which one? Lindorf?
Tanaka. I think Lindoff is
Tanaka. This is actually the second. I can tell you this because I pay attention to stuff like this. This is actually the second article this week that has a character named Tanaka, and they're totally unrelated articles. Two completely different authors too.
Tanaka.
Yeah, Tanaka. It sounds Japanese.
Yeah.
T-A-N-A-K. 3 characters. Let's actually. I think
Tanaka is no character, and that's a bad character.
The author says, "This is my take on the descent into madness trope, which you often see portrayed in the wiki as an individual succumbing to their inner turmoil, spouting nonsense, and giving in completely. I wanted to subvert that and do so in a way that showed the reader that even in moments of great pain and suffering, there is still humanity at their core. I didn't want to write a character who gives in or becomes a surrealist mouthpiece going on about nothing for paragraphs on end. Instead, they're fighting..." Yeah, I know. The jokes write themselves. So I think the reason I'm here in the comments is because I think that there was some pretty good... Yeah, so I'd like to highlight and shout out and thank Random Day. I have a little bit of a muddy history with Random Day and just political commentary that I have on the Random Day as a person outside of actual writing on the wiki. I think as far as the writing on the wiki is concerned, excellent. And I have to shout out a Random Day because a Random Day has been doing an excellent amount of crit. So anytime you see Random Day on the site these days, most of the time he's actually doing something very worthwhile that I appreciate, which is really doing the role of that on-site crit team that has never worked for the SCP Wiki, that has tried so many times to just get defibrillated and jolted into existence and never actually happens. A Random Day is sort of providing that service, and he has excellent critiques. Every time I see him these days,
he's good at writing.
He's a fantastic writer, fantastic. In fact, this might be a hot take, but I attribute most of SCP-3000's success to him. Because I saw a lot of it be developed. This is also maybe a bit of trivia, is that the 3 authors, Random Day, DJ Cactus, and Jorth, sort of how you say congregated in a particular chat room that I've read a lot of logs in, and so I got to see a lot of how this came about. And obviously Random Day with their religious background was the one who introduced the whole sort of Hindu sort of Eastern sort of philosophy into the SCP-3000, which I think without that was basically just a big monster plus vor equals spooky kind of thing.
Yeah, gave it the meat.
Yep. And so here, A Random Day does a fantastic job with this article. So I'll read this. I really like the initial prose and monologues, but the second half of the article feels overlong and bloated. In particular, the descriptions of the researcher's pain start becoming repetitive from the faux testing log onwards, and the interview logs hit numerous cliché character beats without actually developing the characters in meaningful or memorable ways. So just remembering and recalling this intent from the author to not have it become a surrealist mouthpiece, that was a word, going on for nothing on paragraphs on end. It seems as though that maybe wasn't achieved in the way that was intended.
Not at all.
And then another individual whose critique I greatly respect and think is just dead on balls accurate is SD Log. So I'll read this one as well, just because these people I'm thankful to. They do our job for us. The sheer amount of madness speak became a bit of a chore to read after a while. The interview in particular was too much all at once, causing me to disengage. Yeah. It doesn't help that given its speech to text, I couldn't stop thinking that they've got to audibly state punctuation as they go, which hurts my impression of it being a seamless rant. Overall, though, this falls in the category of articles that heap extraordinary amounts of suffering on an individual without sufficient contextualization or characterization beyond that, stunting my ability to authentically feel anything for them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I mean, it's a fantastic way to put it, because we see that all the time. It's just it's so refreshing to see people give that words, and a way to be expressed as if they're holding it up to the light. And so I agree with you. I think this was honestly, I think this was one of the weaker articles that I've read this week. I think, unfortunately, the rating does not reflect that, and I do have to consider that it's probably brand recognition that has gotten this so positively received at this point, just because there's such a large discrepancy in the actual skill, in the actual text.
The highest one that we looked at today. No, the site. I think the site isn't even trying. But this is one of the worst articles. It's in the bottom. It's in the bottom.
Yeah.
I think it's at the top of the rating.
I mean, and you got to give it to the author a little bit, because obviously they were trying something that they didn't have to try, something that has a very low probability play. It's a very low success probability in that, you're admittedly taking these tropes that, historically have never really been that good, and certainly not recently, and trying your hardest to sort of force them to be better. There's something to be said for that, but once again, if you grow something crooked, it's not really ever going to grow straight, and I unfortunately think that's what happens with this article. I don't think it actually escapes the trappings that it sets up for itself and it tries to get out of. I don't think it actually does.
I think you are on it.
Well, all right, so that is so we covered all the ones from May 3rd, huh? We did. Yeah, you're right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here. Feel free to hang around. You say you got some things to do, so maybe you wanted to leave.
I just got a text asking when you start makeup on.
Well, I really appreciate you showing up and helping me out and helping us out. It's just lovely to have another voice here.
Yeah, sorry for the potato quality. And all this barking in the background. My door keeps the door stuck.
It's all good. I'm like I said, I'm happy you're here. Yeah, no problem at all. So we'll have you back again. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
I will upside my dude.
Good talking. Take it easy. All right. Thank you to Harmony. That was excellent. I just love talking about this shit. I love talking about SCPs. I love getting into SCPs. I love getting into the guts. I love doing surgery with the gloves on, obviously, and just getting in there. So, yeah, that was Harmony. Harmony decided to take May 3rd, so we've got through all of those articles, which is super duper nice, and cuts down the amount of talking that I have to do, maybe a little bit. So we'll get back to where we were. We were just about to get going on the next article that started the week. So this is 6456. Where are you? 6456. Here we go. Okay, so let's get our AI buddy who we pay to tell us what's up.
A bare bones emotional grab. X-Men style anomaly is suddenly hijacked by a pataphysical bully antagonist who taunts the reader until it meets a satisfying enough end.
Yeah, so this 6456, interesting looking. I really appreciate how the con procs are very simple. They're very pragmatic. I love the rugged minimalism that starts this article off. And I would continue to love it were it not soon trashed as sort of a kick-away ladder that is climbed up, and then as soon as it is climbed up is discarded. And it does that really for the purposes of a pataphysical extravaganza. So the anomaly is really the same way as the structure of this. There's very few ingredients on the plate by the time we get to the addenda, which is, once again, something that I'm appreciative of, but in the greater context of this being just an excuse to get going to what the author really wants to talk about, it's just a little, I don't know, it's just a little too little. Does that make sense? The interview really starts off kind of sparse as well, minimal characterization, but enough to get some of our emotional bearings. And then we get a truly visually stunning, but relatively simple and totally format-breaking insertion here. It's done in order to indicate a definitive pataphysical shift in the article, and after that we see a new character taking the spotlight called The End. So this is a pataphysical voice that is essentially, not quite, maybe God, but a demigod at least. And we see as we read that it can remodel the setting in an instant to be more, narratively interesting and particularly messy. It pokes fun at the generic and formulaic characterization and the emotional wind-up that had been taking place so far, and gruesomely does away with some of the characters. So, for example, we have this. In a violent, so the initial SCP ceases to exist in a violent splatter of viscera, and then the researcher Timry, I think that's how you say that. This is what we have our good friend Brian for.
Timry.
Yeah, Timry. So the researcher Timry, the end tells him to shut up. He's not narratively interesting, and so the skin bubbles and his flesh liquefies, dripping to seal his mouth closed. So, yeah, so it also kind of, as you can maybe tell from what we just read, it sort of mocks itself. This character at the end is sort of being a meta-narrativic device. But it also, while it kind of makes fun of itself, promises us that this experience, this pataphysical experience, won't be painful. Well, I'm sorry, but excuse me for not believing that instantly. I'm not going to bite on that just because it says it. So, the more casual of the metafictional fun here includes a reference and an actual link to the wiki's lowest rated pages, which I think is this. Let's see. Yeah, lowest rated pages, which is great. That's a very interesting thing to throw into an article there. Yeah, so and then obviously it has this opt-out where this link leads you back to the beginning of the wiki, the homepage, basically. So anyway, this is basically a direct pointer to the reader that actually occurs later in the second addenda, where the subject is you. And I think if there was any sort of tightrope walking that's difficult in this anomaly in this article so far, this is kind of where it falls off of that tightrope. It sort of wobbles, which metafiction and pataphysics is very prone to do. It's very hard to really ride and skate that balance very effectively, I think. It's another way to say this is pataphysics is a very unstable element, that quickly experiences some form of like radioactive decay into something, less exciting, less radioactive, and way more stale. So as opposed to a careful treatment that we've seen so far, in some ways, this you showing up really sticks out like a sore thumb. There's really no reason why this would be in here, even if we're taking the end as seriously as possible. So this laughing while smashing the concept sort of direction takes up most of the article after this. At this point, the addenda designations, the quote box divs, the format remnants, they really all make zero sense, and any finesse is really kind of thrown out the window in favor of this sort of bombastic approach to the pataphysics. And this seems to be the point that the author is trying to make. Everything is sort of lathered in this Neo-Law Foundation style zaniness, something that we'll see again and again. We've already seen it, I think, in a few articles this week, but we'll definitely see it again. Fuck off, like just like overly rude, sort of, try hard, edgy, like either teenage or middle-aged angst. I'm not sure which one it is. Now, there are some redeeming qualities to this, like how it goes so hard into pataphysics and yet distances itself so forcefully from, the more, let's say, the more academic, the more philosophical directions that people tend to take pataphysics in. The sort of like, I'm super smart, like look at my big brain that has to be held up behind me like a bridal hood sort of interpretation of pataphysics. So this goes in the other direction, and it has some really refreshing absurdism injected into this. So for example, this was a pretty funny part where the author has Dr. Clef, Dr. Bright enter handsomely from stage right, laughing among themselves and being attractive generally. They stop and face you expectantly, raising their defined eyebrows. And of course, they also explode into viscera. So this is just the end having fun with us, sort of being a genie, sort of something out of Aladdin where he basically conjures things up just at will. So there's, once again, this sort of absurdism that, can cast, powerful figures in site lore on demand as sort of bargaining chips to the sort of candy-delighted audience that would take this as a good thing. But by the end, the addenda logs are simply blocking in stage notes of some absurdist play, complete with the characters' names in all caps. You see Tilda Moose, you see Timmery's back at the end. This is very, very play. This is very theater esque writing in this right here. So, yeah, I would go so far as to say this is an entertaining backhand slap to the overly esoteric interpretations of pataphysics, seen elsewhere in the site. And I'm thinking specifically of Dr. Placeholder McDoctorate's work, things like SCP-6747. This is really a bitch slap to things like this, to things like that. And so it's a little nice to see. I'm not going to lie. It's sort of this. I'm not full of it's actually an actual quote in here. I'm not full of nonsense terms. So this is what the end, who is the puppet, the mouth of the author here, is saying through the end, says, I am not full of nonsense terms. So what does that remind you of? And I'm not going to try to beat you over the head with how intelligent I am. And when addressing a clone of you, the character, later on in the article, we get this. My God, man, let's watch your language. I know gimmicks that would tear your throat out for that, but I admit you're not totally wrong. I don't exist, yada, yada, yada. So, it seems as though the pataphysically sort of like, esoterics, they're sort of laughed at in here. They're sort of laughed off stage by this article. So if this article has a redeeming quality to it, and there's several actually, to be honest with you, I think that's one of them. But it's really unbalanced. You have the end character taking a moment to peer a little too intently through the fourth wall at the reader. Sometimes in more hushed ways, but also other times just in more flat out ways too. Like, for example, this line, "You're not going to stop, are you? You're addicted to it. You interpret this as reverse psychology," and maybe it is. And then there's actually one moment where he actually talks about the scroll bar, looking at the scroll bar on the right-hand side of the page. And this line too, "You're not one of those people who," I think this is a typo, "You're not one of those people writes self," yeah, it should be "who writes," right? "You're not one of those people who writes self-insert romance fiction over these freaks," right? And he's talking about, Dr. Clef and Dr. Bright. So there's some very pointed leanings into the fourth wall. Well, look at that scroll bar. We're nearly at the finale now. See you there, prick. So the end character turns out to be quite a cocky asshole who thinks because he can control the elements of the page that he's actually in control. But the old pataphysical leapfrog escapes him as a gradually expanding in-article recreation of the rating module shows up in the middle of his dialogue, portending his demise. And so the end is apologetic. He sort of kind of freaks out, but it's too late. He's sort of met his match. So the real pataphysical grace in this is that, ironically, it would have worked way better if the article had gone negative, because that would have entailed the destruction of the end in one more definitive layer than just narratively in the article. So, but obviously that's not going to work as a larger goal. So, yeah, I think there's other issues in this. Like, there's this line up here about Timmery, his skin bubbling. Let me find this for you. So Timmery's skin bubbles and his liquid flesh melts, dripping down to seal his mouth closed. There's a little confusion there regarding the physical states at play. So liquids can't melt. This is described as liquid flesh, and so obviously melts is being used as a verb here from some transition that's already happened. But the way that it is worded makes it seem like it's confused. I think flesh melting, his melting flesh or his liquid flesh would avoid this potential snag in what is otherwise, obviously a very, very polished article with respect to clinical tone. So this is a really tough article for me. I definitely recommend that you read it. I don't know, speaking about upvotes and downvotes, like whatever, like that's way over there. I don't know, honestly. But I do think it's worth a read, if only to get yourself a different interpretation of just how crazed pataphysics can be. And you may have already seen that in the hyper academic, hyper literal sense of pataphysics. But this is obviously a more theatrical and absurd, playful, sort of very thespian sort of direction to take pataphysics into. So, both might be your thing. One might be your thing more than the other. Neither might be your thing. But obviously, this is Router House, by the way, who wrote this. So everything that Router House does is going to have a certain amount of polish to it, even if you don't like it stylistically. And I think this is actually a typo. This article is not. This article is called "That's All She Wrote." So I don't know what this coming soon is doing up here. Maybe I just don't understand. But anyway, it's not too terribly long. It has a lot of dead space in here that that can make it seem like, if you're looking at the scroll bar, as the end calls you out on, can make it seem a little longer than it really is. But to me, this is just completely overwrought. It's total neo-law foundation. I mean, obviously, it doesn't really have any semblance of care because it is so pataphysically absurd. But even then, it just still has too much of the flavoring on it. I don't know how, but it still does. So, but I definitely do recommend you read this, because it is definitely one of a kind. And is obviously very well received. I think this is entirely too high for its rating, and if it was anyone else, it'd be much, much lower. But that's just the nature of the beast. All right, so we will move on to the next one. Let me take a quick peek here at something. Get a big gulp of water. We'll probably take an intermission here. Not right now, but just in a minute. So I can get some water here. All right, so let's move on to the next one. We did, what was that, guys? So the next one is 5863. Very thankful to Harmony for taking a chunk of these. We can get through these a little easier. All right, so let us talk to Brian. Tell us what this one is about, sir.
A zone that is anomalous by way of seemingly nothing being there, though there are hints things are there.
Okay, this is a really weird article. Just one of those highly conceptual articles, like just flagrantly abstract articles. And I think it does a pretty good job of that. So the conprocs are short, as you can see. They're very dense with above average clinical tone in there. The description is immediately interesting in that it's one of three things. All of these things given their own tab. The three descriptions constellate kind of around this wildlife refuge and the Department of Unreality. So that kind of maybe gives you a hint as to where we're going with this. But the treatment of the anomaly and its, I was going to say its constituents, but it's really these non-constituents. So what's happening here is, as Brian said, there's this anomalous zone that seems to have evidence that things go on in it, but there's no real tangible evidence of that. There's no remnants. There's no leftover sort of data that can be used to definitively say what is going on here. So it's sort of this interstitial space, this in between of something being anomalous and something not being there at all, and kind of plays with that a little bit. And that's really why we have these proposals. And so you see the description section, you have these tabs, and each one is a different proposal. It's given a different Greek letter. But, and by the way, this is really interesting. It's so odd to see all these things sort of pop up at the same time on the wiki. We have, I think, a couple of different articles this week that use a proposal approach to the descriptions. This is probably the first one chronologically, but it shows up again and again, which is just, I don't know, it's coincidental, I suppose, unless these people are talking behind the scenes, having mini contests with one another. But, so this is, Department for Unreality. So with those articles, obviously it takes sort of a Swiss cheese, holy kind of approach to whatever it is that's there. In this case, where people and events should be, but who are not. And so the third tab I thought was the most interesting. It introduces this idea of a disunion area, which is, I'll read this, as a theoretical concept initially conceived of by yada yada yada, which proposed the concept, that's a redundancy in the sentence structure, of an anti-nexus, or an area of space which is not only devoid of, but appears to repel anomalies. So this sets up a tangle of concepts. If it repels anomalies, how is it anomalous? Well, that's sort of the leapfrogging going on here conceptually and abstractly. So it's a very, very interesting article. It certainly has a lot of thought to it. And then we go down to the addenda. We get two what are tagged as MP3s. They're not actually audio files, I'll have you know. I know you're disappointed, just like me. But they've been transcribed for us, and these are really the only records of any kind ever recovered from this zone thing. These describe some distorted static, what appears to be a serene getaway behind that static, such as ducks softly quacking, an open grill sizzling some meat, and even, as it says, the unmistakable crack of an opened ice-cold aluminum can, whether that be a soft drink or a beer or a non-alcoholic beverage of some kind, whatever. And so we kind of start getting some hints dropped here and there as to what is actually happening here. And we I think start to realize that it's not really ominous at all. And we've seen this type of anomaly before. It's kind of the covert vacation getaway, disguised as an SCP. We've seen this a lot, and even recently, actually. But there's a very, very famous example of this written by Troy L., I think in Series 3, called The Duck Pond, that does the same exact thing. The aesthetics in this variant of it, I think, work really, really well with the tone and the subject matter of the anomaly. So you have these stark grays, these blacks, these whites. They almost seem, this whole article seems to almost greedily keep any color away from showing through. And that sort of overlaps, I think, with the concept here, where there's this exclusion zone where nothing really is expressed. And once again, I also appreciate this introduction and literary device of the disunion area. I think I'd love to see more on that. I think that's probably the most interesting part of the article. So I think at about plus 30, I think this is perfectly adequately rated for what it is. It's short, it's sweet. It does have some interesting things going on and some novelty. So I do recommend you read this. Once again, even if you don't like it, it's short enough to be okay with that. So, all right. And so this is by, I should have been looking at who wrote these. Synth Panda. So good job, Synth Panda. All right, the next one is SCP-6949. Let's take a peek at that. And of course, let's let Brian give me a break and tell us what this is about.
Yet another wooded area, this time a grove of trees. These trees produce a unique fruit that is identical to legal tender of the United States. They are also fruits and act as the primary food source for the local ecology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember this one now. So, yeah, just like he said, trees, it's essentially money trees, isn't it? Kendrick Lamar would be proud. The description really paints this as a little too obvious of a motive image for this. It's like that stock anomaly that you would purchase from some anomaly generator, out there that will license you ideas for the wiki. And so it's really, in my opinion, it's a little thin because of that. The conprocs likewise are a bit generic. They're a bit bland. They do sort of introduce a hook. It might not be a catchy hook, but it is a hook, so we'll give that to it. There's a little bit of conceptual spice when the money is actually edible and calorically nutritious, as we find out. That might be a nice solution to inflation, actually. But the animals in the area sustain themselves on the money trees, the dollar bills of which I guess are the fruit. So they eat the fruit. They eat the money. But they have a very strict system of percentages. You can see here, 10% are eaten by the remainder of the anomaly's local ecosystem, yada, yada, yada. There's a set of strict percentages by which to dole out the money fruit, almost as if the message is something like, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. And if you know anything about the history of political philosophy, or just politics in general, you may know where that phrase comes from. And so that's kind of the vibe that this gives off. The narrative sort of forks off when Foundation personnel in this incident defy the protocol and collect some of this money fruit from the money trees for themselves. These are security personnel guarding the anomaly, as it says here. And so this, as maybe expected, causes a famine in the local ecosystem because they're so Apollonian. They're so strict when it comes to their doling out of these percentages, and really eats into their bottom line. So as expected of more sapient societies, we might say, famines lead to social unrest and revolt, which is what we see the animals of this area resorting to here. Now, I think the biggest thing for me in this article is that the animals themselves are not really addressed as anomalous. It's sort of taken for granted that they are sapient and they can speak, and later we see them picketing and protesting outside of Foundation quarters and headquarters just because of what has happened with their food supply. And so it almost gives this like Animal Farm sort of framing device that doesn't care, that it doesn't cover how or why these animals are anomalous. So that was kind of a little bit of a structural question mark to me. I'm not too sure that works very well. But it really gets entirely too on the nose to me when the animals of this region sort of become activists. Not that animals can't do that in an anomalous setting, but it's just a little too ungracefully delivered. It's a little too forced. It's just a bit of unstimulation that the anomaly is that. It's just the money tree. It's just the fruit. And then the author clearly tries to push that in an interesting direction, but I don't think it ever actually gets there. It is written exquisitely well. I think the actual technicals of the prose here are good. I think they're actually probably average to above average. The clinical tone here is pretty good. But I think the actual craftsmanship of the writing, it would cover all the issues that I have with this, except for the conclusion, which once again, just you have very trite things, very slacktivist kind of activity going on here that just ends sort of uninspired, flat to me. So I think it's short enough, to be okay to read, but I don't recommend this article. I just don't. I think that it's, I think the rating is probably appropriate in this one. It's just not. I don't know if it's worth your while. It just seems like it's not a lot going on for it. So. All right, 6949 was that. And so now we'll do 6246. 6246. So Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about that one, please?
A human whose head is constantly on fire, but who doesn't care, and who teleports places to just chill a bit before leaving. Likes to do this in remote places.
Yeah, I remember this one. This one's good. This one's really, really good. Really, really good use of picture structurally, saving it until the very end there. Very simple stuff happening in this article. It's quite short. Highly recommend it. Obviously, it's got this ultra clean CSS theme that barely differentiates between bold text and not bold text. But yeah, this is obviously you can see pretty successfully rated, and I think that it deserves every single one of those upvotes. The conprocs are direct, they're simple, they're user-friendly. The description is likewise very frank, and the anomaly here is very candid. It's not really trying to be anything complicated. Gets out of the way with very quickly. I think the discovery log here is the first addendum is interesting. Apparently, in this headcanon, all Foundation agents have body cams, so that's something that's pretty cool. And then plus 10, by the way, just from one gun nerd to another. Plus 10 for using a press check in here. Very, very cool. Not something that you see a lot of. So there are some needless commas in here, so just some grammatical things that I couldn't help but notice. Agent Moss's aim is held on the entity as he moves forward, enough to see the front of its head. Oh, they actually got rid of the comma, so looks like they fixed that. Anyway, so there's an elegance to the prose here that is reserved in that it's, once again, just like the anomaly, not trying to be anything fancy, but yet it's brimming with capability. You get the sense that the author is very, very skilled at this, and just kind of, it's kind of a sleeper car that could beat you down the drag race, like no problem. But just, it doesn't look like it would do that. Doesn't look like it's capable of doing that. It just does. So the scene here that it describes, the interaction between this this agent Moss and the anomaly, is kind of a dud, but it's intentionally so. It's not supposed to be anything but. And it does sustain, despite that, these pressurized circumstances that push out just a few direct philosophical blossoms that are deep enough to be moving and just shallow enough to be convenient, where you just appreciate them and go past them without having to chew on them too much. There's some vaguenesses here that I think are best left unexplained. Like, for example, the cow thing. There's a cow that comes in here that kind of came out of nowhere. Does it shapeshift? Is that the anomaly who shapeshifted into a cow? You know, did it just pop out of nowhere? Who knows? And also, for example, the relationship between the sun and the actual entity. They both seem to have some sort of connection. They go away at the same time. Don't know if that's anything deeper than that, but just this is just a beautifully decorated anomaly. It's just so minimalist and elegant and modern, and just very geometric, but very, very clean lines and shapes that nothing is overstated. Yet there's a lot of substance here. It's a very lovely splash of microfiction with just the right mix of casual and odd. I think the author's strokes are flourished enough, but also very minimal to give the impression that this could be very, very elaborate and embellished if the author wanted to do that. But we get the vibe, I think, that this is plenty, and I agree, and so does everybody else. This is just a fantastic article, and let's give props to who wrote this real quick. Jack Waltz. Really, really good stuff. Don't know if I've read a lot of their work, but yeah. All right, so I got a comment. Let's check it out. Thank you, Fern, for showing up. Fern says, "Oh wow, didn't realize you're streaming now. Cool. Happy I can make it. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Yeah. Every Friday at 7:30 p.m. CST." As I put my shirt back on, I'm sorry, it's so hot in here. I had to take a break. How indecent of me. Yeah, every Friday night we go through all of the articles that were written on the Confic Wiki. Confic Wiki. We go through all the articles that were written on the SCP Wiki. Every single one. We take a look at them. We synopsize them so that you can stay caught up. And we kind of give a few recommendations here just so that you can get a decent idea of what it is that you would like to spend your time reading. Because let's be honest, there's just way too much content. Thanks, man. There's way too much content coming into the SCP Wiki. It's just too much to keep up with. And that's really the purpose of this. It's very, very hard. Did we read SCP 6456? Yes, we did. And we talked about it already. Hate to tell you, but you know, I don't do upvote or downvote here. Instead of that, I do just recommendation or not recommendation, because I can want you to go read something that I think is bad, you know, for a variety of reasons. So 6456, I didn't really have a determination on that one. I think it was in some ways it was very bold and brilliant, and I think in other ways it really suffered from the same things that the more academic directions of pataphysics can suffer from. Just way too in your face, just like reducing the personal space of the reader to zero, that the fourth wall is so collapsed. But I do recommend the read. It's obviously one of a kind of an article, and the sort of thing that you're either gonna love it or hate it. And yeah, I actually watched the video of yours. You did a great job with the voice acting. I was actually very, very surprised, very impressed at your ability to do that. Why don't you type in, by the way, the URL of that video, and I'll just pop it up here on the screen, just in case someone who's watching this later can go check it out. I'd love to support you in that way, in whatever way I can. Not much. I'm not a popular fellow, but send the link and I'll be happy. I recorded that in my car, yeah. And you did it without getting into a wreck. All right, you get that. We're going to move on because we got just a metric ton of articles to get through. So the next one is 6769. 6769. And so Brian is going to tell us just a wee bit about this one.
A humanoid part of a potential GOI who can manipulate its captors to work for its secret organization, which is slowly, silently, and parasitically taking over the Foundation's operations for its own ends.
Haha, he says he was parked. Good, glad. Good choice. Yeah, so thanks, Brian. This is a really bad article. I hate to say this. I think the rating is totally appropriate. The classification header is odd. You see this like LTHA that no one knows what that is. It tries to explain what it is a little later, but low threat humanoid anomaly. But it actually shows up again and again, over and over. A League of the Heavenly Appendage. And sometimes that can be a really nice glue that kind of blends together all of the themes in a given article, and kind of gives it this sort of like ethereal kind of distracted, sort of charmingly distracted thing going on. But unfortunately in this one it just seems to be very confused. It doesn't really understand what it is and it can't make up its mind. That's sort of the vibe that this gives off. So it doesn't really make sense to put this up here either. No matter what it stands for, no matter what you plug in here, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm not sure what it is doing up there. It really becomes, I think, an unskilled welding spot for the article's deeper attempt, which introduces a pseudo-GOI with the same acronym, the LTHA. And it involves a protocol, a thaumaturgical committee for some reason, and none of this is very clearly explained. And so just whatever the author is trying to say here does not come through at all. The addenda, I think, have the apparent skill of, a subpar author, someone who's well below the standards of the SCP Wiki, I would say. Gratuitous, black box redactions, seemingly randomized notices in the documentation, just gaudy flashing images in the CSS. These are bad compositional decisions here. And just like, let's take a look at this interview log, like just randomly having a component of the anomaly just shine. And of course it doesn't make any sense why. We have whole phrases that are black box. Some of the one character's lines are all bolded for some reason that's never explained. The second collapsible here makes zero sense. I have no clue what's going on here. It's a message from a researcher who has been affected by the transmissive properties of the anomaly. Again, it's not clear what this could be, and who has some of their statement redacted, as you can see again. But this essentially boils down to a whistle blow on the manipulation that's centered around the anomaly, that the anomaly is enacting. But for some reason, someone who's redacting this, who clearly didn't want some of this message to get out, only black boxes some of it and leaves the rest intact, enough to get really the whistle blown loudly and clearly. So it structurally, logically makes very, very little sense to me. We continue to get more of these LTHA acronym meanings. It's ridiculous every time. It gets more ridiculous every time it pops up. So I called this article just a few lines into the interview up here. I mean, I completed it because I'm a completionist. I think that I should finish most things if I'm going to say things about it, generally. But this one was easily callable by this point right here. Actually, probably before this point. So I do not recommend this read, not even a little bit. In fact, I think this +7 rating is way too generous. I don't think this should be on the site at all. That's what a downvote is, I guess, huh? 6480. 6480. Let's take a look at that. And, of course, we'll get Brian to read this for us, and maybe Dr. Fern has shared his URL.
A paperback self-help book that is a jumble of various characters from multiple languages and scripts, but that can be deciphered spontaneously by someone focusing on them, is different for different people.
Right, so you got kind of like heavily subjective sort of anomaly play here. The conprocs are zippy. You see how short they are, so I appreciate that. I love that. But there's some really rickety clinical tone here. Really in the description, some of these things are odd. Oh, it looks like they fixed that too. Good. Maybe somebody called that out. But yeah, so when I read this, there was some rickety tone in there. So Let's see if they corrected this one. This is another one. I do love to see it when people correct shit. They didn't correct this one. Most of the advice provided from SCP lacks longevity effects. However, that's not a good statement at all. And in any setting, and certainly in a clinical tone setting, we get sort of a journal syndrome in the discovery, which is right here in the first addendum. And if you don't know, journal syndrome is just that oh-so-convenient appearance of a journal, usually in the immediate proximity physically of the anomaly that explains everything that you could ever want to know about it, and without which you would be totally lost as to what this is doing. So we get that journal syndrome here, a stack of ripped-out pages that fortuitously accompany the anomaly and that also explain everything someone at an information deficit would want to know. So that's not really recognized in any sort of situational awareness by the author here. And then to make the matter worse, the author of the journal leads off with, "I don't know why I'm still writing this. My days are about as interesting as a blank canvas, and my motivation is at the bottom of the ocean." Yada yada. So you immediately shoot the already weak invocation of this journal thing in the foot when it comes to character inventiveness. I mean, character investment. You can at least make the character invested. It does not work when you do this. This is a doubling down of the bad direction that you're going into. So I think throughout this we get really repetitive, sort of adolescent ocean metaphors that keep trying. Like there's an ocean between us, I'm drowning, the waves are crashing, all this kind of like really bubblegum pop, cotton candy sort of poetic, wannabe sort of poetic sort of sentimentality going on through this. It's just very, very saccharine. It's very sugar-filled. It'll give you a cavity. Don't eat that. Here's one. I can almost imagine myself walking into the waters before those dark mountains that are my dreams. These are finally dropped by the protagonist, seemingly aware of how stale they are, but the damage has already been done, so that's a shame. What else can I say about this one? There's a line in here that reflects the modern-day experience of reading the SCP Wiki for me. I think it's just really unintentional metacritique here, and this is it. A character by the name of Omariz, I guess. Hey, Brian, could you pronounce that one for me, please? Omariz. So a character, Omariz. This should be a possessive. Omariz's with an apostrophe. Omariz's book is starting to feel less fulfilling. I mean, it's still helpful, and I keep coming back to read it, but it feels like the old stuff that was once inspiring feels numb. That's just kind of, I don't know, it's unintentional, kind of humorous for me. This was probably typed on a phone, and the way you can know that is because there's a ton of its, ITS, ID apostrophe S confusions that happen here. The journal writing repeats a line from the description verbatim about the book's effects not having longevity. So that, if you can see here on the search, it happens twice, and this is almost an exact phrase. So it's just poor polish, poor craftsmanship on that aspect. The article ends up being the anomaly, really, and the article ends up being a page from a self-help book. And as the protagonist slowly realizes the futility of finding a inspiration in anything but one's own self, this final sentence appears. So this is all I can say. Improvement is more important than change, and improvement has not happened at all. This is the sort of platitude that fits nicely into a self-help book, in that it actually doesn't make any sense. So it kind of doubles the part of the anomalous journal, which is supposed to be a self-help book. It kind of just doubles that an octave up. It's just as unhelpful to the reader as the SCP is to the character. And it actually doesn't make any sense because, it says improvement is more important than change. Well, improvement by definition is change. If you improve, then you change. So it ends up being more of a motif or a mantra in my mind than a solid article. I think this is in the same category and compositional ballpark as that cyan text-colored article we already looked at tonight, which basically constructs retroactively an entire entry whose whole point is to get to the final line. That's not necessarily a bad thing structurally, but when the final line is too starkly apparent as something that was sort of, everything else was sort of grafted to, you know, in an attempt to, in an excuse really to pronounce it. I think that those types of articles are really, really bad, especially when it's at the end and especially when it doesn't land. So this is a medium length read. I think the rating is appropriate at 14. I think that's a pretty good indication of its quality. I don't recommend this read. I don't think there's anything in here that that is truly worthwhile. I think that the very end could be some sort of motto for somebody that helps, kind of like in a self-help book, but a lot like the character in this tale through the journal entries, it's really going to wear off. It's like a drug. You know, the first time you hear the motto might be good, but it's going to get weaker and weaker with time. So I really don't think there's a whole lot to get out of this article, and I do not recommend you read it. All right, Fernlund said, I did post the link. Unfortunately, I just realized that this doesn't let you post links. So why don't you send it to me in Discord, and I will share it on the screen. I apologize about that. Fernlum says, I'll give it one thing. It's pretty accurate to someone writing a private journal. Yeah, it's got its moments. It's got its moments for sure. I just think ultimately the journal doesn't escape. It doesn't attain believability to me on the whole, and seems to be kind of a contrived device just to get to this uninspired quote. Don't think you should use that quote in your sermons, just FYI, my opinion. All right, one sec. God damn, this is a gauntlet. Okay. So, the next one, SCP 6615. Oh my God, I remember this one. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
A school kid gets weirdly interested in geology. Does he embrace the subject, or does it embrace him?
Ooh, good question. Here is, by the way, Dr. Fern did a reading of SCP 6456 with Rounderhouse's blessing, if I'm not mistaken. And there's the address right there. Check it out. Impressive voice acting. I like that one quite a lot. Okay, so this article is 6615. It is fantastic. Go read it. It's by Sword Lover 87. We see, unfortunately, immediately. But the consolation to this is the fact that the only introduction to Sword Lover 87 I had was their article we covered a few weeks ago, which was a collaboration with, I think, Western, which was that SpongeBob at the bottom of the sea thing that I was not particularly impressed with. So it's always a good thing. It's always interesting to see somebody, particularly when they're working alone. You can really use that to sort of parse out their contributions to the article, what they could have done to it. And this is just so good that it makes me feel as though that SpongeBob article was probably a bigger percentage of the other author than this Sword Lover. Of course, anybody can have a bad article for sure. Anybody. But let's take that down. Great music. But this one was just so impressive. So we do get another journal. In fact, the SCP-6615 is a composition notebook. But this one just does such a better job with it. If you want to go read this one and the last one we covered, you'll see the difference of how these journals are used effectively. This one does such a better job with it. The conprocs are well played. There's some insight there, not a lot. It's very short, but it's enough to get us primed. The anomaly itself is kind of neat. It's not really anomalous, but it's the only informational source of an event that presumably was anomalous. So that's why it's categorized. I think that's a little tricky. It's a little, I don't know about that, but we'll let it slide because it just is very clever. The addenda are, of course, the character starting off saying how dumb it is to write a journal. This birthday present sucks. I don't care what mom says. It's a diary. Diaries are dumb. So this seems to be a common theme. Once again, it's really one of the most prominent symptoms of journal syndrome. But despite that, once again, it really gets really cooking here. So we can excuse that for sure. really, this addendum is the journal entries that are all, of course, being recommended to this character to express their thoughts. And like I said, this one plays the almost anomalously helpful journal really, really well. The first great note here is the actual character. This is a kid, and the writing here, speaking of believability for the previous entry, the writing here actually believes very, very much like what we would see in a kid that age writing. I think the kid is like 11, something like that. 9, 10, 11, let's see. I can't remember how old. 13-year-old. So, yeah, it really does feel like something a 13-year-old would write for sure. So that's a good job on the author, who I assume is not 13. And then the events describe the journey, which gets creepy when everyone starts to very strangely start digging holes, like unbiddenly, for no clear reason. I think the most unsettling thing about this is the Foundation's perspective, and also the perspective of those who are in the journal reported as digging. All that is totally contradicted here. So you get one version of what happened from like the Foundation and like the people they interview, and then the actual events in the journal itself totally contradict that. And so it really throws everything into this sort of confusion, this epistemological confusion, and really makes this a difficult thing to try to do. Yeah. Oh, goody, more journals. Yeah, this one does a really good job, by the way. So that contradiction really kind of sparks this and really sets this off, I think, into being very, very interesting. And this very crafty separation of believable narration that just happens right there. It's just a very small split, but then the situation accelerates and they get just wildly divergent. So it's quite nice. The progression in the journals is not too ridiculous and is properly revealed without saying too much. It's like something from a bad dream, but something about the way this is set up tells you that despite what the Foundation has concluded, this event that could be anomalous actually happened. It's very clear. It comes through very strongly, and that's a testament to the writer bringing that through without actually saying it. The second addenda, honestly, wouldn't have been there at all if this were, I think, a less talented author. But it's sort of like the extra push that really makes this an incredible article. It takes the creepiness factor and does just absolutely amazing things with it. Some anomalous events occur that seem to give credence to the journal's version of events, and a simple, to-the-point exploration via a drone quickly goes wrong. The way the themes and the characters here are tied in to this entire progression throughout this addenda is just absolutely awe-inspiring. I highly recommend you read this SCP-6615. At plus 30, this is an absolute travesty. It is entirely too low for the quality of this article. This is an incredibly good article. Very, very well written. I don't know. Maybe Sword Lover just needs to get their stock up. That's just the unfortunate reality of the situation there. All right. Fern says, reminds me of The Buried, the fear entity from the Magnus Archives podcast. I haven't checked that out. I've heard so much about that. But have not had a chance to check that out yet. But speaking of The Buried, that sort of captures pretty well, I think, some of the themes that are worked with here. Kind of earthy tones, subterranean sort of anxieties and exploration. So, all right, moving on. Boy, we got a busy night tonight, don't we? 6353. We'll take a quick intermission, I think, probably coming up here pretty soon. But let's go ahead. Let's get Brian to tell us about this one.
Badgers who can travel cross-dimensionally through wormholes. The badger in question can talk and kidnaps people.
Yeah, this is a pretty ornate story with some characters and some character motions and movements that you maybe wouldn't expect. Even as far as maybe halfway through the article. And it's a pretty lengthy one too, by the way. I think the anomaly itself is pretty flat. As you can see, it's basically just a badger. It's a lot like the things that we've seen before. For example, that cat anomaly from last week. that basically could speed up into a alternate dimension just by running quickly. As then we also see here basically, an animal who's kind of talking and complicating containment by being crafty. There's a short backstory that's given about the badger here. So I think ultimately, this is I would call this a lumbering chord progression of an article here. Something that we've seen really almost the exact same progression play over and over again. And there's actually there's some variation to the melody that's overlaid on that, which provides a little bit of the refreshingness to this article. But just the components that are here, the ingredients, the animal, the talking, the cheekiness of the talking animal, it really amounts to this sort of unimaginative, culture-spanning meeting of the minds over the proverbial peace pipe kind of thing. Not without, of course, its hilarious gaffes due to cultural misunderstandings. And of course, and they even get to the point where they do some unlikely duoing together for a greater appreciation of some, typically forgettable thing like a badger's personal problems. So the whole thing has this like Scooby-Doo sort of arc where there's a mystery, it's kind of a murder mystery. I don't think it's really original enough to really escape the analogy to Scooby-Doo, in the sense that Scooby-Doo kind of recycles a lot of material and animations and things like this. We've just seen this over and over again. I think it's an incredibly long article, as you see here. I think the characterization is pretty good. I think the SCP item is given a really thorough effort in characterization. I just think it's really, really uninteresting for its subject matter and also its length. I don't think it even comes close to justifying its length, not even close. So 6353, I'm so sorry I cannot recommend that one. If you have a lot of time, you want to check it out, I recommend it. Because you might end up liking it by the end, but it's just a very, very long. I think the rating of 14 is, it's good to gracious, I think, in this case. Fern is talking about the Magnus Archives podcast. Highly recommend. High quality podcast. Seasons 1 and 3 have big Confic vibes. Well, that's interesting. Once again, I've seen this recommended quite a lot, so that's probably why, and at some point I'll check this out. All right, 6353. Let us get to the next one. That is 6481. And let's get Brian to tell us a wee bit about that.
A macroparasite centipede that preys on humans and thrives in unsanitary hospitals.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow. We got content warnings, parasitic infestation, infant mortality, other shocking content. Which is sort of a flattery for the authors. Like, oh yeah, there's just some really, really crazy stuff in here, but they're not wrong. This is just a very interesting article. The containment procedures are engaging. They make some interesting moves. They talk about what to do with people who are unhelped by amnestic treatment, and that how psychotherapeutic support is considered beyond the scope of containment efforts, which is really not really ominous, not really a good sign there. And there's some, like I said, some really trigger warning type stuff going on in this article. The anomaly sets itself really in a sort of germophobic helplessness, the kind you would lose sleep over while inpatient in the hospital, about the things that are around you, invisible perhaps, and then turns the gross factor up to 11. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to unredact this image that is the main image of the article, sort of showcasing the anomaly. And so, obviously, if you're, if you're grossed out by things like this, this is obviously not going to be good for you. But it gets a lot worse. So, it includes some highly traumatizing methods of sudden infant death that I won't go into any more detail over. There's a little bit in the Conprox about it right there. Neonatal asphyxia. It's really, really traumatizing how this is described in this article. So I won't go into it anymore, but it really hits home this earlier statement about not being able to help people who don't Get Help by Amnestics. So I think the clinical tone throughout this is absolutely superb. The imagery is advanced. The descriptions are vivid. All of these things combine to make a very memorably disgusting SCP article. I think there's a curious stylistic decision here. You see in the addenda, you have separations in the div box for this video log. Each section sort of taking its own free-floating box, which is not really a big deal. It's just certainly an oddity to see. There's a really good word used in here, be-shrouding. What a good word, be-shrouding. First time I've seen that one, so that's awesome. There is one kind of uneven sentence that's stuck on one of the last paragraphs of the video log that I don't really know what's doing there. It's it really suddenly casts this infant that I don't think was mentioned earlier. If it was, I just lost sight of it. But that was the only thing about this article that was even remotely off. I mean, everything else is just so on point. There's some really, really great author insight and commentary here in the comment section. One of the authors is Floppy Phoenix, who seems to sort of have the milk market cornered. Milk does appear in this article in the sense that it doesn't maybe say it explicitly, but note the white substance that is pooled during expulsion, and it talks about human breast milk. So there's a Floppy Phoenix, or Lieutenant Flops, as is known these days, riding that milk train again and again, almost like a stylistic tell. But a really, really fantastic article. Super good article. In fact, if this wasn't so just outright uncomfortable and disturbing, I'd probably recommend this as the one for the week. But I mean, you should definitely check this article out. It's not long. It's amazing actually that it does so much with so little space. This is a really, really good article. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Let me fix that. There we go. Ooh, my computer's so hot. No wonder everybody's so hot in here. All right. So that is 6481. Highly recommend you do that. 6594. That's the next one. Let's take a peek at that. And let's get my man to tell me a little bit about this one.
And anomalous marquee name investor who got so good by reading the Wanderer's Library.
Yeah, so this is kind of a cutesy anomaly, but one that kind of hits home in all the right places, I think, because it casts someone who's anomalous, but you can kind of see a social media sort of advertisement here, it's just very believable. So it kind of grounds some insanity in, something that really, unfortunately, you might actually see, which is somebody, trying to run sort of sort of a soothsayer for the stock market kind of deal. Operating out of the financial district in Manhattan, New York City. I think this image selection is a little cheap. I have no clue what it's doing here other than it just says money, and this person is working, in Wall Street, I guess, because everybody who deals with big money on Wall Street is hanging out here. So, or a lot of them, I guess. So, I don't know. I think all in all, though, This feels a lot like Rounderhouse's Vegas article. It feels exactly like it, actually. And so I think that is really the only thing that keeps this back from me from being like really, really good. I mean, it's thoroughly entertaining. It sort of has this action movie kind of vibe to it. I think the dialogue is pretty bad. You have this like just ridiculous vulgarity everywhere. That really stands in. I think the biggest criticism about this article is that it uses things like profanity and all caps and just really unrefined substitutions for actual characters. So instead of actual characters here, we have like dick references and all this kind of stuff. So I think that this is certainly an article for someone, and I think it actually is pretty highly rated at the current moment. That's decent, 35. But I don't I think you have to be a special somebody, a special demographic, probably younger, probably the sort that hangs out in SCPD and thinks it's really cool to like this article. I think it was an entertaining read. It was pretty easy to get to just because it's sort of like this what's next, what the heck's going to happen next kind of thing. But, it's a little on the long side, and I think this is pretty novice writing. Really puffs itself up, beats its chest, tries to be a lot bigger than it really is, and I think it really comes through. This is by Plague PJP. It's called The Business Wizard Richie Marks and the Biz Wiz Experience. So I don't particularly recommend this read for any good reason or not. It's sort of lukewarm to me. Don't really feel strongly about it one way or the other. But I mean, if you like, if you like Marvel kind of dialogue and the Router House Vegas article, you probably like this. So maybe go check that out if you like that. That's SCP-6594. Okay, and so now we have finally gotten back to May the 3rd, which Harmony covered for us. So we will pick this up in just a minute. I think we're going to take a quick 5-7 minute break. I got to get a refill of water here because my voice is starting to go. So y'all just chill. I'm going to put this on an intermission, and we will be back in, let's say, 7 to 10 minutes. All right. So y'all hang out, grab a drink, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. Wow, I needed that break very, very badly. And in the future, I'm going to work on making these a lot snappier. It's just it's really, really fucking hard. I'm not going to lie. So we'll try to get this done a lot quicker. In fact, let's start that now. We'll just kind of breeze through the rest of these. That's some kombucha for your ass. I'm not a huge fan of kombucha, but right now it's the zest that I need. And they're sponsoring this stream, so thanks. All right, 6377. Fuck me. This one was okay. Let's still get Brian to kind of tell us a little bit about this, just to kind of clear the throat.
A psychological anomaly that anthropomorphizes the visible moon and sun surfaces, and has unease from being watched by them too.
Oops, no, we already did those because that's what Harmony did. So we are at 6377. I told you this was hard to do. Okay, yeah, this is way better. Let's try this one. Brian, don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong, man. Good job.
Department Combat in Universe. This pits different teams against one another in a budget-inspired competition to write the best entry for a given slot.
Yeah, so like Brian says, this is basically like Department Con, but just in universe, where the director kind of says, hey, we're in financial straits, and so I need you guys to compete, which doesn't make a lot of sense personnel-wise, basically, by getting everybody to do the task that only one department would do, and ultimately only selecting one of those, batches of work to actually mean anything. I think it's a really poor use of resources. It actually doesn't make a lot of sense, but whatever. Let's just overlook that. There's all kind of departments here. You kind of get that this is like Remora of the Department Con, and if you don't know what Remora is, that is our vocabulary word for the day. Remora are those little fish that you sometimes see, also called suckerfish, that are seen kind of hitching a ride on larger creatures like sharks or whales or whatever. Those are Remora. Here's a good picture of one. Remora and a shark. So this is kind of Remora. This article is kind of Remora of the Confic. Sorry, not Confic. The God damn, my brain is it's like tapioca. The Department Con, okay, and they all sort of compete. Each one of these has a different way of going about this anomaly that it's not really that clear what it is. It has something to do with sleeping, something to do with sleep paralysis. And the weirdest part about this is that every single entry in this, once again, another table-style description, really the whole article is this way. Each one has this rating at the bottom with a discussion going on. This gets really wacky and crazy. For example, this surrealistic one has a rating of plus 5,000 and 5,000 comments. I think it sort of is a tip to SCP-3999 in a sort of loving way. This one is negatively rated. This one is way negatively rated. And then it goes on. And it gets a little crazy at the end where you have this approximate rating here for the Department of Reality, which doesn't really have a strong thematic tie to that department in any way that I can see. And then for the Department of Sommunistics, or however you say that, it has a plus or minus rating of plus or minus 188. So this kind of just gets a little haphazard, and I think it's sort of frays at the edges as it tries to do something here. And ultimately, we get this poo-poo on you, you're in big trouble from the higher up, for the site. So it just, some of it is witty and fun. I think that most of the entries are really not that good. So I think all in all, I was not really highly recommending this one. In short, we have sort of not an entree of an actual article, but sort of a tapas of Holders-esque, sort of 4chan era SCP attempts clustered together in lieu of any actual anomaly here. So pivotal sentences in this have flawed grammar. Periods are there where question marks should be. There's a really an overt juvenility to the whole article, once again, that ends with a message from this executive assistant that says, "Yours not sincerely, Director Page." So I think this is rather short. I think 11 is a gracious rating for this. I don't think this is good at all. And I was a little surprised to see it written by Bread Tyrant, who is usually so mature in their conceptual treatment and somebody who we've seen have a lot of articles over the last 2 weeks. I mean, we're talking like 2 to 3 articles a week. This is the only one from Bread Tyrant this week. And for whatever reason, I think the typical level that we're used to seeing Bread Tyrant operate on is just completely missed here. It felt like a plastic toy of an article with bright, flashy colors meant for really the most distractible of attentions. I don't think it pulls through at all. I think it really it fails at almost every turn that it tries to make. So 6377, unfortunately, I cannot recommend that. But we did get a good vocabulary word out of it. So. All right. Next one is 6385. Let's check that out. Okay, Brian, help me out and tell me a little bit about what this is.
An anomalous neoplasm affecting a very specific demographic, that grow into mature centipedes, which grow into something so fucked up, you have to read it to believe it. Containment procedures recruit tubers and seize the creation of a Japanese idol agency, with Foundation agents secretly being tubers, and a Foundation-sponsored virtual anime girl idol.
Yeah, so this is essentially a form of cancer that occurs in weeaboos and is in direct proportion to how sad of an adult child, a man-child, that they've grown up to be. There's absolutely grotesque imagery here, both physically but also emotionally, and that these people are so, emotionally dependent upon what really amount to centipedes. This is the second centipede article we've gotten this week. I think both of these are really, really good. I want to say that, that's a tough one. Which centipede is better? I guess really it's a toss-up. Both of them are really, really fucked up in their own specific ways. I think the other one is a little better in that it gets that fucked up in just, a very small amount of space. So I think it does a better job just aphoristically. But this is absolutely grotesque imagery in here. The creep factor elements are kind of mesh insectoid things that kind of mix them with pop icon idolization. It's made weirder in that the authors it might be into this kind of stuff, probably a little too much. Not really, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's just a totally messed up. There's a very, very convincing journalistic report in here. So this is like taken from some online magazine that has issues and volumes. And there's a whole backstory about this group. But this is really written in a true journalistic style, something that you would see, and it's so convincing, it's so well done that it's just fantastic to read. The person really did an excellent job, high attention to detail when it comes to particularly this part of the article, this Aviatica report up here. So just really, really well constructed. There's one sentence that I think captures how messed up this article is. Let's see if we can find it. Probably not. That's a shame. Yeah, there it is. Taku, who's a character, also takes pride in being able to produce homegrown centipede pop idol things. Babies of these occasionally emerge from his skin's acne, and he has to avoid his other centipede pop idols due to their jealousy. So that's kind of gives you a little bit of a peek into this window. It's just absolutely disgusting. It looks like it's going to be terrible. This is why you can't always judge by, a book by its cover. Is just from this opening image, it looks like it's going to be awful. Just another, teen bop excuse to inject anime love into an SCP article. But, it really turns to a very convincing direction. In the words of the author, it's about the worst parts of Japanese idol culture, obsessions, parasocial relationships, industrialized beauty, and the treatment of these idols as cute products or tools for really, really sad, lonely people. So totally worth every upvote it has. I think it could stand to have a little more, honestly. It's just a really, really good article. Hands down, one of the best I've read this week. It left a very, very strong impression. I highly recommend you read SCP 6385. All right, the next one we've already done. This is the Korean article that has the ACS going on. So we won't look at that one again. And like I said, as you can see here, the latter part of the week had just a tremendous amount of international articles posted. We have some from the Chinese branch. We have, this looks like the Ukrainian branch, I suppose, the Spanish branch, international branch, Chinese branch, Japanese branch. What else? The Italian branch, and as we've seen, the Korean branch. So let's get into the Italian one. This is a 79 IT, and so we'll get Brian just to read a quick objective analysis of this.
An anomalous computer that connects with other devices forcefully, and absorbs information, and has a fun anomalous side, which is Age of Empires essentially when it shouldn't be able to play on it. The researchers stumble upon some hidden features in this game.
Yeah, so I think 9 is a good rating for this. So basically, it's a computer that kind of connects to other things, and it has a game inside of it that's kind of like Age of Empires. And this looks like kind of a mundane version, but the researchers start to understand that you can really fuck with it in sort of like God tier, God mode ways, and make things change and mess with it like as if you were messing with the code or like doing speed running techniques or something like that. And then at the very end, the stakes are raised because it gets really dramatic when, first of all, you get to the point of the article where they put a mimetic kill agent to kind of protect some serious information from getting out, and it looks as though in the process of testing this, they come across a rather interesting effect with some long-reaching consequences, particularly back in the past. So there's a little bit of time play going on in this article. All in all, I think it's a mildly engaging article that doesn't really pop off or take a sufficiently interesting turn. It being a translation, and I hate this is the case, but most translation articles will have clunky clinical tone that is either written that way or is a product of the translation. It really prevents it from sustaining sort of the adequate level of impressiveness I think that these articles should have clinically. The twist is well embedded in the narrative and, like I said, adopts this sort of paradoxical time play. But the implications of it are potentially interesting, but the scale of significance is either too understated or it's non-existent, and it kind of comes off as sort of like just a boring performance, I think. The mimetic kill agent is pretty cool, though. I mean, check this out, and I think this is a pretty good one. Obviously, this is a Mandelbrot of some kind, and is totally fractalized, so it looks good, but very kaleidoscopic, but I think, unfortunately, this image is the best part of this article, so I wouldn't recommend to read. I don't think you're missing out on too much, but if you happen to be a big connoisseur of international articles, this is relatively short. It is not bad, I think. I think 9 is probably a good place for it to live at the current moment, at least, and yeah, check it out if you really like this, if you're a big fan of international articles. They do great work. This one just isn't the greatest example of them. All right, what's next? SCP-6383. All right, this is a stop sign that is so non-anomalous that it's anomalous. If that doesn't make any sense, you should read the article. It's a pretty twisted pretzel of an idea. There are a few snags keeping this article from being really, really good. They're mild, but I think sufficiently damaging from a logic standpoint. Which really is the whole game of this anomaly that it tries to play in order to make its statement. So it really kind of tangles itself into a structural pretzel. There's sort of a catch-22 going on here, where it's impossible to be anomalous, but it is anomalous at the same time. Kind of like that exclusion zone article we came by, but just with a little more confusion than that. It's a little more ambitious, and I think it trips over itself a little bit because of that. So it's a structural pretzel, and so it's very tasty because it's pretzels. But at the basis of it is this logical hole that can't really work. It doesn't really have the possibility available to it to work. The Foundation's attempt to designate this as non-anomalous instantly auto-converts itself into being an anomaly in this setting that is described here. The attempt to single this sign out as anomalous is sort of instant killed by this object class designation here as non-anomalous. That's sort of an idea of what the pretzel is going on here. I think 64, I'm really surprised, honestly, to see this at 64. I think that this is really clever. It's short. I definitely think you should read it. I definitely think you should be on the site. It is sort of a conceptual accomplishment just because nothing like this is, I haven't read anything like this in a long time. So it's very interesting and really relies on a pseudo-pataphysical framing device that goes a little bit into the background radiation of what's happening here and why this ostensibly non-anomalous thing is actually anomalous or whatever it is. I have my own problems with this. I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to call something anomalous based on a 0.05 percentage differential, but because that's really the benchmark for statistical significance in statistical studies. The p-value is typically 0.05, which means that anything above that is statistically significant. But actually, this one is 0.5, so excuse me. Anyway, yeah, check it out. It's definitely worth a read. Super short, kind of a mindfuck. But definitely worth your while. So 6383, regardless of what you think of it, definitely should be checked out. 2955JP. Let's get Brian to introduce this one to us.
A pataphysics anomaly that inserts base reality characters into lower levels of fiction.
Yeah, it's pretty well said. I think 10 is a good rating for this. This is really boring. It really goes on and on and on. It kind of reminds me of that Centipede article because it goes into a lot of anime culture. In fact, the author of this one seems to be particularly fixated on a few, choice animes and uses a lot of characters and references to it. So this does more so feel like the forced insertion of someone's favorite anime into an SCP. It's basically another weeaboo dream come true article. But it does ask some interesting questions about, pataphysical jumps and what the characters experience and how it changes them. It actually hogties some GOIs in here. Dear College shows up. It does lean heavily on some cross links. For example, the first sentence of the description, name drops another JP article. I don't think it relies on that too much to its detriment, but it's never good when it's in the first sentence of the description. There's just not really much here, unless you happen to be a fan of the anime that this is about and or are really emotionally attached to the female, youthful, and totally not creep magnet protagonists here that are here. I think this is not worth your time. It is pretty lengthy, and unfortunately, I think the rating has pretty much tagged this. There's no commentary on this either, so that doesn't help. It's just kind of a uneventful, sleepy article. So, not the best representation from the Japanese branch. All right, the next one is SCP CN 1500. Let's get Brian to tell us just a wee bit about this one as well.
An anomalous, xenophobic, and primarily agricultural group of ethnic scalies that have some lineage with Sarkicism.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this super duper brief, in stark contrast to this actual article, which you might be able to see as I scroll through is just an absolute mammoth of an article. In addition to that, as you can see just from a bird's eye view here, almost half of the words in this prose are numerical designations, sub-designations. They get up to all kind of numbers in here, and they're just everywhere. They're crowding the actual prose. We got plus 30. How many footnotes do we have here? 50, 60, 70 footnotes. Let's see, 74 footnotes in this thing. I didn't clock this word-wise. I think I remember someone else mentioning this. I think it's one of the longest articles on the CN, and it probably bumps up against something like 1730 in terms of length. This is just an absolute monstrosity of an article. I think that most of this is incredibly boring. It's very, very dry, very technical language. There's just an inordinate amount of detail that goes into things like The anthropological study of this anomalous people. I think the image work is fantastic. If you notice this, you've got sort of a serpentine eye with some scales over here. This is just really, really great image work. And apparently, this article is very, very well liked in other branches. On the CN, the China version of the wiki, I think it has like plus 350 upvotes, which is just insane for that community. But it's just a mind-numbing overload amount of detail here that I don't think is crucial to the read. And to be very honest with you, like I said, I am a completionist. I typically like to finish everything. I absolutely cannot finish this. I have this sort of show to do, and it would take me a week to read through this for sure. If this was the only thing that I had to read, this is easily a novella. It's actually plus novella length, and I'm sure that it's good, but I'm just gonna refrain from making any broad statements here. I can only comment on what I read, and what I read was particularly uninteresting and dry, but I am told that the story gets very interesting and is pretty good. So on the English wiki, this doesn't seem to be enjoying the celebration that it has elsewhere, and I wonder if something is lost in translation because, like I said, this was just absolutely pain-inducing to try to get through, and I did not finish it. All right, SCP-006 International. Let's get Brian to tell us about this one as well, please, as I drink my kombucha.
An anomalous restructuring of the ocean floor to create Islamic architecture. Interesting, we have a competing hypothesis carousel, this time with respect to the individual international branches.
Yeah, so another pseudo-anomaly thing that no one's really sure of and that we get a lot of different pitches for. This is the third one that we've seen kind of this week that does this tactic. So it's really strange to see all these things pop up. I wonder if this is sort of a copycat sort of phenomenon or what. But this is another one, and this is kind of demarcated by branches, international branches. So it's got some interesting little leaning on slightly meta walls of this construction. But so basically it's about this underwater civilization, who they are, where they came from. I think it really concludes with this nebulous note that sort of defines the feel of this whole article. The whole thing is really nondescript for all these words and these varying theories. Some of these varying theories are very, very interesting. But it gives us enough at the end to note, this is the note I'm talking about, to kind of convey a mystical, sort of supernal, and really intriguing enough pull as to what might be happening here. So it's relatively short. It is very interesting the way it's set up. I think 19 is a good rating for this. And like I said, some of these hypotheses are really bland, and other ones, like I remember the Spanish one, is really, really interesting. So it's kind of hit or miss with those, but I think it's a fine read. It's interesting, it's engaging, and it's international, so it's nice to participate in that too. So definitely go read 006 INT. Okay, so this is another Korean one, and honestly, I think this one is going to be my recommendation of the week, particularly now that I've kind of gone through most of them again here. Let's get Brian to synopsize this for us.
An anomalous screen located on the wall of a men's bathroom in an abandoned school. This is filled with a 20 by 20 grid of small, red squares. This screen indicates the schematic location of living things in the abandoned school by turning one of the red pixels yellow. The larger the living thing, the more boxes the yellow indicators take up.
As you can see, this is very simple, it's very visual, it's very compelling, it's engaging, it's bold, it's bright. The anomaly is given appropriate treatment through some escalation here. Testing logs is really how it does that. It really infuses a lot of creepy sensory input like smell, listening. Really puts the reader into the situation that's painted here. Some sentences have the translation affliction with regards to the clinical tone. I think I remember reading, is it the second addendum? I want to say. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, the first sentence in the second addendum. Led by sight, blah, 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 blah. Destructive analysis was done to check its anomalies. That doesn't work very well. But aside from that, the twist here is very well done. It's very effective. Really good fridge horror going on here. And it just does so almost pictorially. So it kind of reminds me of IHP's Future Imperfect in a way, but just simplifies everything down to such a brilliant little package. 28 is, it's a good rating for this. I think it should be honestly much higher. This is just a fantastic article, great international representation from the Korean branch. So I highly recommend you check out 877. Like I said, that'll probably be the recommendation for the week. I think this article is just fantastic. The rating certainly does not state how good this article is. All right, the next one is ES158. This was a really weird one to me. Let's get Brian to sort of tell us a wee bit about it.
A hive mind potato variety that anomalously produces electricity, and that can talk, and that shit mashed potatoes.
Yeah, so they shit mashed potatoes. They're actual potatoes. This is sort of like a really, really odd compilation and mosaic of different cultures. They have this like tribal mob disembowelment, cannibalistic thing going on. They have elements of past, like more classical cultures, such as implied pederasty, something you'd see in the Greek cultures. They have modern day representation of violent homophobia. They have some gruesome parental and mating interactions in here, the kind that you would see in nature, such as like the insectoid or arachnoid ripping up or devouring of a mate during mating, or for another example, the shark-like consumption of new offspring. All these are sort of blended together to get this sort of like surrealism, and there's this really odd naivete that the subjects of this culture display, which is that they feel like they're more fortunate than anyone else by being the victims of some of these things, which is really fucked up. And so it really, I think it's a really, really great article for clinical tone, particularly for a translation. The clinical tone in this is really good. So either the original author did a fantastic job, the translator did an excellent job, or maybe both. I don't know. It's lengthy. It's not a short article. You got a lot of collapsibles going on here. It's very dense. It's kind of reminds me of that really long Chinese article 1500 in that it's just so anthropologically dense. You have very, very academic approach to this. Quite difficult to get through. It does have some interesting, sort of refreshing characterization going on here and some interactions between those two things. But it keeps itself fresh by that sharp characterization and really a very interesting, very imaginative and creative, creation of this culture here, and what they do and how they do it, and the way that the Foundation really develop a mutualistic, symbiotic relationship with these things is pretty wild. So I do recommend you read this. Not the most rewarding at all. Like I said, it's a little dry. It kind of reminds me of the other one, but it's a lot shorter. So I do recommend this one. Okay, so we're almost done here. Two more. 6731. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, no, yeah, we decided not to do this one. This one's hanging out at -4. I don't think it'll be on the site for very much longer, so I didn't do this one. Looks good, though, huh? All right, 6778. Let's do that. So, Brian, tell me a little bit about this one. This one is so weird. Such a weird article.
Anomalous human whose subconscious has an out-of-body experience, and who experiences a day trip speaking to itself, stimulation binge. This seems like a orgiastic or Dionysian fugue state of hyperactivity, which permanently alters the human's personality. The article becomes more about the second-order characters in the act of addressing the anomaly itself.
Yeah, so this is pretty short. A lot of it is this dialogue here. So the scroll bar is, it's big, but it's actually, a little misleading. It's actually a quicker article than what the scroll bar would suggest. And so we have this really odd anomaly, this like very trippy sort of anomaly going on here. Just like this image shows, sort of like a nakedness in the wilderness, high on mushrooms kind of experience that's happening here. Very psychedelic. and almost pagan-esque in its vibe. And the author does some very interesting things, just like ontologically here, like messing with things like the subconscious and like treating it like a physical thing that can pop out or be excised or something like that. The characterization here is pretty shallow. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that it just sort of only does enough to establish itself and no more. This is really interesting. You'll sort of see this kind of common fade out of the text that kind of fogs over in a mist that takes it over at just the right time, because it gets really kind of techno-babbly here. That's really the point. It's supposed to represent pataphysical sort of tuning out of both the reader, but also of these next characters that we see, who, like Brian said, are sort of second order. They're not really pataphysical in the sense that they're firmly in universe on the same pataphysical level, but at the same time, they're a little more perched than what was introduced previously in the first half of this article. So it does some interesting maneuvers in that regard. I think it plays the pataphysics thing pretty skillfully, which once again is a very hard balancing act to do. So it sort of suggests itself without making itself overt, which I think is the only way to do pataphysics well. And so to the extent that it does pataphysics, I think it succeeds. So I definitely think it's worth a read. It's not really that long, and just the dialogue here is so charming. It's just the sort of small talk that is believable, but it's fantastic enough to not be ordinary. So the author on this is T. Rutherford, who we have shouted out before and praised recently for a lot of things. I think 26 is actually remarkably low. I guess this is only a day or two old, but I think this is well worth more than 26 net upvotes here. So give it a read. I think you'll like it. It's just trippy. It's just trippy is the word for it, and kind of really authentically brings you through something like a trip. It's not a bad trip, not the greatest trip, but it's certainly a trip. So you can't say that about every article. All right, so that is it. So next week we will start with the 6th of May. Looks like we still got some international articles trickling in here, and so we'll see what we can do. I'm going to try to make these shorter in the future. I think that the second half after the intermission is sort of the pace that I'd like to keep. I'd like to go into more detail, but I'm just not going to be able to. It just is a little too long, and it's just a very difficult thing to do. So I do appreciate you being here and joining in, and I appreciate Fern dropping in, making comments. I really appreciate these. These are good. And of course, I want to thank Harmony for dropping in and taking a day's worth of SCPs off of our hands. So really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. And thank you for joining. So tomorrow, don't miss our show. This is our talk show weekly. We talk about everything to do with SCP and containment fiction in the space, drama, article recommendations. We're going to recommend probably that Korean article, all kind of stuff. So check that out. That's tomorrow. That starts at 11 a.m. Central. It goes for about an hour. We have as many guests on as who would like to come. And it's actually an open invitation show. So we have a live phone number that is active at the time that we are live for that hour. I'll put that on the screen just right now in case you want to plan ahead and call us. You can also leave us a voicemail if we're not actually live, and we'll listen to that voicemail when we do get live. But the phone number is 316-444-3115. Again, 316-444-3115, and that's SCP Meta. That's our main talk show. We'll do that tomorrow. And then Sunday, be on the lookout for the hyper-condensed speed run through all of these articles that we went through today, and that'll be covered in about a minute and a half to 2 minutes. That'll come out on the Confic Magazine YouTube channel. You can just type in Confic Magazine YouTube and Google, and that'll get you there. So tune in for those things. I appreciate you checking this out, whether you're here right now watching or whether you're watching this after it's posted. I really love doing this. It's incredibly challenging, I'm not going to lie. And so that's why I'm probably going to make it a little snappier, get through these a little quicker. I got no problem with that. I'm sure you don't either. And so we're going to continuously improve this show. There's no way I'm not going to do this because it's just too much fun. I enjoy reading too much, and I enjoy talking about these things too much to not do this. Just a reminder, again, next week, we will not be having this show at its normal time. We'll try to do this show on Sunday night. but Friday night I'll be out of town. I'll actually be out of town for a couple of days. So won't be able to do this, and I won't be able to do our typical Thursday night reaction night either. And I think we'll probably have to cancel SCP Meta next Saturday, so be sure to check it out tomorrow. Get in while you can. This has been Lack of Lepers. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you for catching up and staying caught up with all the interesting and bad and mediocre SCP articles that are coming out of the wiki these days. It is quite a trip, quite an effort, and I just thank you for the opportunity and for all the feedback. I appreciate it, and the attendance. Y'all take it easy.